Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Ronald Platt. On July 28, 1996, in South England, Captain John Kopeck and his son prepared for a day of fishing on their Brixham trawler, Mulcahy. After an unproductive day, they decided to venture further into an area known as the Roughs. They lowered their net into the water and waited. Soon, they felt the familiar pull of a heavy catch. John thought they had caught a big fish and decided to bring the net back to the surface. However, it wasn't a fish. John and his son were shocked and a dead body fell onto their deck. John quickly notified the Brixham Coast Guard. The body was badly decomposed, indicating it had been in the ocean for a while. Although fish had nibbled on it, the man was dressed neatly in a long-sleeved shirt, corduroy pants, and brown shoes. The police observed that his pockets were emptied, and he had no identification. The only distinguishing features were a badly smudged tattoo on his right hand and a Rolex watch on his wrist. The body was transferred to the medical examiner's office in Devon. It was estimated that the man was between 40 and 50 years old. The tattoo looked like a group of stars. The only serious injury was on his head. It was not fatal and, along with other bruises, appeared to be consistent with having been dragged along the seabed before being brought onto the boat. His lungs were filled with water. It was determined that he died from drowning, something common in the area given that the English Channel is right off the coast. The police suspected he might have fallen overboard during one of the ferry crossings. The only other way to identify him was through dental records. If he was a British citizen, his records would be available, so the examiner proceeded with this method. However, it would take some time. By chance, a mortuary technician noticed the man's watch. It was a Rolex Oyster self-winding watch, fully waterproof and needing motion to stay active for 48 hours. They could trace the ownership if it was genuine. By examining the watch, the investigators could determine that the man drowned on July 20, 1996, because the calendar feature showed the date as July 22. They also found a serial number hidden between the strap and the watch face. This number was sent to Rolex to check if the watch was authentic and if it had been serviced by the owner. Several weeks later, investigators identified him as Ronald Joseph Platt through Rolex records. The medical examiner confirmed this with dental records. Ronald Joseph Platt was a 51-year-old TV repairman. Records show he was born in Calgary, Canada, in 1945 before his family relocated to Britain. Ronald was unmarried and had previously served as a soldier in the British Army for his national service. Close friends described him as a quiet, introverted man. He loves his native Canada very much. He is also passionate about electronics and precision engineering, which led him to purchase a Rolex in Germany in 1967. It became one of his most treasured possessions. And his ex-partners noted that he would not even remove his watch to shower. With this information, investigators needed to determine Ronald how he ended up entangled in a fishing trawler. Detective Constable Ian Clenahan from the Devon and Cornwall Police was assigned to the case right from the start. Police discovered that Ronald's last known address was in Essex, far from where his body was found. Clenahan contacted the Essex Police Department for further investigation. Inspector Peter Redmond offered to go to the address to help investigate the case. When Peter visited, the house was empty. He contacted the owner, who explained that the previous occupant had moved out some time ago, but provided the detective with a reference letter. The letter contained the forwarding address and contact number for someone named David Davis. Upon calling the provided number, Peter was able to reach David. The detective inquired about the relationship between Ronald and David before explaining that the body they discovered in Devon was possibly that of his friend. David agreed to visit the Essex police. Peter met with him and found he to be friendly and confident. However, David was quiet and didn't ask many questions about Ronald's death or how it was discovered. When asked, David mentioned that he and Ronald had been friends for several years. He told Peter that he hadn't seen Ronald in over 3 months. The last time they met, he had lent Ronald money to start an electrical business in France. David believed that Ronald had been living in France all this time. During the interview, Peter discovered that the tattoo on Ronald's hand was a maple leaf, the national symbol of Canada. David explained Ronald's affection for Canada. After sharing all the information he had, he left the station, promising to send Detective Peter a photo of Ronald. A few days later, Peter received the photo as promised. The Essex police had been able to conclude the investigation, arriving at the theory that Ronald had fallen overboard and drowned in the canal. This matched the story told by David. It had simply been an unfortunate accident. While the Essex case was being closed, Detective Constable Ian Clenaghan needed to resolve the loose ends on his side. He tried to contact David several times, but was unsuccessful. So, he turned to his colleague Peter in Essex for help in getting in touch with David. Then Peter agreed and visited David. The meeting took place in the rural area of Essex, where there were only 4 houses, each with a name instead of a traditional number. Peter knocked on the first door, and an elderly couple answered. When they asked Peter whom he was looking for, he gave them the name David Davis. The couple informed Peter that their neighbor was not Davis, but Ronald Platt. They then described Ronald to Peter, and he realized that it was the same man he had met before. Redmond realized something was amiss. He reached out to Clenaghan in Devon and shared how, by pure luck, he knew more another part of the story. Detectives from both areas now understood that the situation was more complicated than at first. Peter turned his attention to collecting details about David, the man impersonating his deceased friend, Ronald. Then Peter returned to visit the elderly couple he knew as Frank and Aubrey. They recounted the story of Ronald Platt, his much younger wife, and their 2 young children. Ronald and his family often vacationed in Devon because they had a yacht there, but the specific name of the place couldn't be recalled. In Devon, Clenaghan began reviewing the evidence and started by interviewing old witnesses. His first visit was to John. When questioned, John explained that the net used had pulled up a 10-pound anchor along with Ronald's body. John had given the anchor to a friend, who then passed it to his mother to sell. Luckily, the anchor wasn't sold, allowing investigators to recover and preserve it as evidence. Clenaghan's next step was to interview people who knew Ronald. He reached out to Ronald's brother Brian, who mentioned Elaine Boyes, Ronald's former partner of 13 years. Investigators visited Elaine and uncovered the link between Ronald and David. Elaine had met David in 1991 while she was working as a receptionist at a fine arts auction house in Harrogate, England. She described David as tall, engaging, and charming. They then talked about David moving to Yorkshire and the subject turned to jobs. David wanted Elaine to join his company. Elaine mentioned it would be temporary because she and Ronald were planning to move to Canada. David, trying to win her over, suggested he could help them save money for the move. Soon, Elaine started working as his executive assistant and later introduced Ronald to David, leading the 2 men to quickly become friends. Ronald and Elaine was fascinated by David's boastful stories and admired his luxurious lifestyle. David offered them to become directors of his company, the Cavendish Corporation. Initially, Elaine was hesitant about the offer. David explained why he didn't want his name associated with the company. He claimed that his ex-wife was a wealthy doctor in New York who continued to demand alimony from him. At this point, Ronald and Elaine had come to trust David and believed that David was actually trying to keep distance himself from his ex-wife. David sends Elaine and Ronald to Europe to negotiate deals on his behalf and gradually draws them into his plot. On Christmas Day 1992, David invited the couple to spend the day with him and his daughter Noelle. After a satisfying meal, they sat down to exchange gifts. Elaine received a card titled "The Ultimate Gift." David had promised to buy Elaine and Ronald 2 tickets to Canada if they used them before February 1993. Elaine felt overwhelmed by the short notice, but Ronald was ecstatic. His lifelong dream of returning to Canada was coming true, thanks to the generosity of David, a man he considered a true friend. David persuaded them that it was better to begin their new life sooner rather. He quickly started preparing for their departure. David suggested to both Elaine and Ronald that they should have stamps made of their signatures, in case he needed to sign any documents urgently. David would also keep their driver's licenses with him in case he needed to prove their identity. This request wasn't difficult for the couple because they trusted David, who had just helped them get started. So, in February 1993, Elaine and Ronald flew to Canada to start their new lives. Canada did not provide the better opportunities Elaine and Ronald had hoped for. They arrived in the country during winter, found little work, and financial struggles quickly led to relationship issues. They attempted to overcome these challenges, but the increasing tension caused them to grow apart. 5 months later, Elaine went back to England to be a bridesmaid at her sister's wedding, with no plans to return to Canada. David, now a family friend, was invited to the wedding. At the event, he spoke with Elaine and asked about Ronald. He was saddened to learn that she would not be going back to Canada and that her relationship with Ronald had ended. David attempted to persuade Elaine to reconsider and give Ronald another chance in Canada. When she declined, David suddenly changed tactics. He quickly arranged to move himself, leaving Elaine only with his mobile number. Their friendship eventually faded, and the calls stopped as well. Elaine and Ronald were no longer in touch. After leaving Canada, she had not communicated with her ex-lover Ronald or her former close friend David. So, when David reached out to Elaine late in 1996, she didn't think much of the unexpected conversation, as they had little to say to each other after such a long time. David did not mention Ronald, and that was the end of it. He did not tell her that Ronald had died. After the interview, Elaine told the police she suspected David might have been involved in Ronald's death. Elaine provided important clues about the relationship between David and Ronald, but investigators needed more concrete evidence. They started interviewing witnesses after the wedding in Harrogate. David quickly fled with his family to Devon, where he began using the name Ronald Platt. He introduced his pregnant daughter as his wife, sometimes calling her Elaine Boys and other times Noelle Platt. It was well known that he owned a yacht, which raised further suspicion. Witnesses reported seeing Ronald and David together a month before Ronald's body was found. They are said to have booked rooms at the Steam Packet Inn as brothers, David and Ronald Platt. By this point, the police were certain that David was lying about Ronald and what he knew about his death. They just needed one more piece of evidence. By examining David's mobile phone records, they found that calls were made from the same area where the medical examiner estimated Ronald had drowned. The Essex police planned a sting operation to arrest David on suspicion of Ronald's murder. They waited for him at the Chelmsford train station after receiving a tip-off from Elaine, who had arranged to meet David for coffee. However, David managed to slip away. Peter then was decided to drive by David's family home. In that place, Peter noticed activity, but he did not act immediately and requested reinforcements. Peter was assumed that David might be armed as they prepared to take action. A taxi arrived in the driveway, and David quickly escaped when the taxi sped off. The police chased him and eventually arrested him, pointing a gun at him. David surrendered without incident. What the police did not know was that this was just the tip of the iceberg. David was arrested, and his fingerprints were taken. Searching them in an international database revealed another twist to an already tangled plot. The fingerprints were identified as belonging to a man named Albert Johnson Walker, who was ranked number 4 on Interpol's wanted list and was Canada's most wanted fugitive. Albert's story starts in Canada, 6 years before Ronald's body was found in the Atlantic Ocean. Born in Hamilton, Ontario, on August 9, 1945, Albert always had big dreams. Although he dropped out of high school, but he worked as a bank teller and spent much of his free time socializing in Ontario. It was at a social event that he met his ex-wife, Barbara MacDonald. Albert proposed to Barbara after just a 4-day romance, and they got married in 1968. They quickly began their family, having 3 daughters and 4 sons, and raised them in Paris, Ontario. After years of assisting others with financial solutions, Albert, along with Barbara, launched a freelance bookkeeping business. The business flourished, and within a decade, it grew to 6 branches with over 30 employees. Friends were eager to invest with them, but Albert was secretly diverting their money to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. Eventually, problems began to surface. Albert's marriage ended due to his numerous affairs. The people he swindled money from began to get suspicious, so in 1990 Walker decided to leave before the situation became more tense. He told friends he was taking their 15-year-old daughter, Sheena, on a skiing trip to Europe, and used this as a cover to escape. Barbara realized what was happening and, concerned for her daughter's safety, reported her as a missing person. The police tried to chase him, but they lost track of him in London. He assumed a new identity, taken from a client, and started going by David Wallace Davis, while Sheena was renamed Noel. Although he managed to evade the authorities, the name David Davis was still linked to his true identity. He needed a new identity, and he had the perfect opportunity when he met Ronald Platt. Ronald had a very small circle of friends and was obsessed with living in Canada. Albert took advantage of this information. Everything was set in motion and Albert finally got the identity he needed. However, the plans fell apart when Ronald contacted Albert in 1995. Life in Canada wasn't as he had imagined it. Ronald informed Albert that he would return to Essex to settle near David. The solid foundation Albert was building started to show signs of trouble. Having 2 individuals named Ronald Platt in the same area with identical birth details was problematic for Albert. So, he devised a plan. He bought a yacht called Lady Jane and took his family and Ronald to Totnes in Devon to celebrate its launch. During the visit, they bought a new 10-pound anchor, which later turned out to be crucial evidence in an investigation. After returning to Essex, Albert invited Ronald back to Devon for another weekend, just 2 friends enjoying the coast and fishing. Albert sailed the Lady Jane out into open waters, far from the view of anyone on shore. He then struck Ronald on the head with the anchor, rendering him unconscious. Albert searched Ronald's pockets to remove any identification, secured the anchor to Ronald's belt, and threw him overboard. Albert believes it was the perfect murder. However, Albert made one critical mistake. He forgot to remove Ronald's Rolex watch, which eventually unveiled the meticulously planned crime. Albert's trial began in 1998, with evidence presented in court, including the anchor found entangled with Ronald's body in a net. Forensic experts determined that the head injury matched the shape of the anchor. Traces of zinc were found on the pants belt Ronald's, matching the zinc on the anchor. Albert had used the anchor to weigh Ronald down by attaching it to his belt. Further investigation of the Lady Jane revealed more evidence. Hairs matching Ronald's were discovered on a yacht cushion, and his fingerprint was found on the carrier bag used to transport the anchor back to the Lady Jane. Blood stains were discovered near the railway tracks at Albert's residence. The habit of accumulating documents harmed him, as they were confiscated and used to demonstrate his fraudulent businesses and deceitful activities. However, it was the testimonies of Elaine and Sheena that ultimately condemned him. Elaine's testimony demonstrated to the court that Albert stood to lose significantly if Ronald returned to England. Sheena dealt the decisive blow. she could not provide a clear alibi for Albert on the weekend of the murder. She stated that he had been on the yacht and appeared disheveled and agitated when he returned late on the murder day. Sheena's testimony marked a new phase in the investigation. She spoke in court about her life of fear with her father, his charm, and how she felt like a victim, just like anyone else who encountered him. When Albert took the stand, he appeared very charming and confident in court. He claimed that Sheena insisted on joining him and conceded to committing fraud and other illegal activities, but he firmly denied murdering Ronald. He explained that the blood found on the yacht was because Ronald had accidentally hit his head while they were fishing. Nevertheless, the jury quickly saw through his falsehoods and convicted him after only 2 hours of deliberation. High Court Justice Neil Butterfield addressed Albert, stating that the murder was carefully planned and executed with chilling efficiency. Justice Butterfield said that Albert was a plausible, intelligent, and ruthless man who posed a serious threat to anyone who stood in his way. Albert Johnson Walker was sentenced to 15 years to life in 2005 and was allowed to return to Canada to serve his sentence in 2007. At the age of 61, he was sentenced to 4 more years in prison to run concurrently with his sentence. In 2015, Albert applied for parole but withdrew his application at the last moment. Now, at age 75, the Canadian Parole Board has denied his application for day and full parole. His request to travel unaccompanied to Vancouver Island for a personal development program was also denied. It seems likely he will never be released. Albert seems to have accomplished the perfect crime. But then karma caused him to be exposed. If it weren't for Ronald Platt's real Rolex watch and a series of coincidences, he probably would have escaped legal punishment. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Anna Repkina. Anna Alexieva Repkina, a charming and outgoing woman from Chelyabinsk, Russia, hailed from a good family. With a strong work ethic, passion for travel, rock music, and cats, she owned several. Anna was a vibrant individual. She loved capturing life's precious moments through photography and valued romantic relationships deeply. Her ultimate goal was to find true love, settle down, have children, and build a happy family. Anna's remarkable sense of humor made her a delight to be around, something her friends and acquaintances often highlighted. However, her life took a dramatic turn in 2016, when a high school sweetheart of 7 years ended their relationship, leaving her devastated. Despite this heartbreak, Anna refused to give up on her dreams. She took the initiative to try online dating, determined to find her ideal partner. On a Russian dating site, she came across a promising match who seemed to possess all the qualities she was looking for. Anna met a charming young man named William Hargrove, a 26-year-old from Oregon who worked as a bouncer and mechanic. What drew her to him was his fascination with Russian culture, but more importantly, his adoration for her. William consistently showed kindness to Anna, often complimenting her and making an effort to be present for her whenever she needed him, despite the physical distance between them. Those who knew him described William as a charismatic and passionate person with a great sense of humor, who inspired those around him to chase their dreams. As they developed their online relationship over several months, their bond grew stronger. They seemed perfectly suited for each other, sharing similar tastes in music and a love for live performances, as well as a similar sense of humor. Friends who knew them noted that Anna and William complemented each other beautifully. William's caring nature was evident in his thoughtful gestures, such as sending Anna flowers despite being separated by oceans. Anna and William's online chemistry was undeniable, but they wanted to confirm their connection in person. So in December 2016, they decided to take their relationship to the next level. Anna booked a flight to Oregon to spend the Christmas holidays with William. However, she initially made a mistake and booked a ticket to Portland, Maine, instead of Portland, Oregon. Before realizing the error, She had already flown to Maine, but she was determined to make it work. After fixing her flight issues, Anna finally arrived in Oregon. William picked her up from the airport, and they spent the next 10 days together. He took her on sightseeing trips, and they enjoyed activities like visiting the seaside, playing in the snow, and cuddling by the fire. William also introduced her to his friends, and they celebrated New Year's Eve together, sharing a romantic kiss at midnight. It was the perfect Christmas experience for Anna. After a whirlwind 10-day visit, William popped the question to Anna using his grandmother's emerald ring, and she happily accepted. However, what Anna didn't know was that William was leading a double life. During their time together, he had also been secretly seeing his 33-year-old landlady, Michelle Chavez, behind her back. William rented a room in Michelle's house, and it seemed he also held a special place in her heart. Michelle was married with 2 children, but this didn't deter her romantic involvement with William. Their affair had been ongoing for over a year when Anna, William's girlfriend, visited Michelle's home. Unbeknownst to Anna, she was meeting her rival, as Michelle was her boyfriend's landlady. Michelle showed understanding when William brought Anna to her home, perhaps thinking William would never leave her or believing Anna was insignificant, much like her own husband. Whatever the reason, Michelle didn't expose their secret. It wasn't until Michelle discovered the engagement ring that her husband's stance on the situation became clear to everyone involved. Meanwhile, Anna returned to Russia, unaware of the drama she had left behind. After posting a photo of her engagement ring on Facebook, the social media algorithm brought the post to Michelle's attention. Michelle's anger wasn't solely due to William's engagement to another woman. Michelle planned to leave her husband to be with William and, as a symbol of her commitment, took off her wedding ring and gave it to him. However, she soon discovered that the ring was identical to the engagement ring William had given to Anna. It turned out that William had given Anna Michelle's own wedding ring, which had been recycled. Michelle confronted William about this, and he tried to calm her down, insisting that Anna meant nothing to him and promising to break off their engagement on March 1, 2017. Meanwhile, Anna had packed her bags, including her wedding dress, and had quit her job, ready to start a new life with William in another part of the world. Michelle was unhappy about this development. Anna's mother, Yelena, also had reservations about her daughter's hasty decision. She was unsure about William, whom Anna barely knew, and thought she was rushing into things. Anna, however, was convinced that she was in love and saw no reason to wait. Yelena finally released Michelle from her grasp. Michelle, realizing Anna's visit was not a social call, grew angry. She demanded that William find another place to live, refusing to let the engaged couple stay under her roof. William complied, renting an apartment for himself and Anna. However, he continued to secretly see Michelle, sneaking out to visit her and reassuring her of his commitment to her, downplaying Anna's importance. Michelle became increasingly worried about William's growing relationship with Anna, so she took action. She contacted Anna on Facebook, revealing everything about her and William's ongoing affair. Anna reported the conversation to William, but he dismissed it as Michelle's jealousy. Anna believed him, and the couple decided to ignore Michelle's warnings and focus on their future together. They set a wedding date for March 23rd and planned a beachside ceremony. Anna wore the wedding dress she had brought from Russia, and they headed to the beach. However, the officiant failed to show up. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, they returned home. They planned to try to get married again in April. On that same day, surveillance footage captured the couple buying food at a McDonald's drive-thru. Anna sat in the passenger seat, still wearing her wedding dress. William had told her that the officiant was sick, but that was a lie. Despite claiming he didn't love Anna, William had kept her convinced that he wasn't invested in their relationship. However, Michelle had grown tired of William's manipulation. On April 15th, Michelle gave William an ultimatum: choose between her and Anna. Michelle made it clear that if Anna wasn't gone by April 20th, she would take drastic action, build a snowman, a sinister phrase meaning to kill someone, and hide their body in a snowy area where it would never be found. After issuing her threat, Michelle lost contact with William and assumed he had chosen Anna over her. She left him voicemails to express her feelings. On Sunday, April 16th, William phoned Michelle to share the news that he was single again, having just ended his tumultuous relationship with Anna, who was now headed back to Russia. Coincidentally, William had hit a deer with his car and was waiting at the Ali Martile store for repairs. He asked Michelle to meet him there. As it was Easter Sunday, Michelle was attending a family gathering, but she excused herself to join William. When she arrived, they reconnected by having an intimate moment in William's car, reaffirming their strong connection. On April 17th, Anna's body was discovered in the forest. Initially, investigators didn't know her identity, as there was no identification found with her body, and she had only been in the state for about a month. The crime scene lacked a murder weapon, but was littered with trash. However, amidst the debris, a clear plastic bag caught their attention. Inside, they found a KFC receipt, an empty Pepsi cup, and a KFC chicken paper bag. The KFC receipt turned out to be the crucial clue in solving the case. It contained a date, time, and debit card number, which led investigators to Kevin Thomas. When questioned, Kevin revealed that he was best friends with William and had been getting to know Anna. He also shared a tradition with William, where they would eat lunch at KFC every Friday. The receipt, it turned out, was from a purchase made about a week before Kevin's questioning. The investigation into Anna's death led to the discovery of William's deceitful behavior. In his interview, Kevin revealed that William had borrowed his shotgun, claiming he wanted to go to the woods to clear his head. However, William never returned the weapon. The police began to suspect William and Michelle after hearing Kevin's statement. Following Anna's death, William's behavior became increasingly unusual and suspicious. He withdrew money from Anna's bank account to pay off his debts, and was caught on camera buying cigars and Star Wars Legos at various stores. William also confided in Kevin that he was spending money recklessly to cope with his emotions. Furthermore, he began researching time travel and even reached out to strangers on WhatsApp, offering to exchange his soul for the opportunity to go back in time. William wanted to travel back in time to April 16th to prevent a situation caused by his best friend's mistake. However, on that day, William was seen crying in a store employee's arms, claiming his girlfriend had just broken up with him. He had moved back in with Michelle, but was picked up by the police and questioned. The police asked William about his whereabouts on April 16th, and he said he was on a drive with Michelle. When asked about Anna, he denied having a romantic relationship with her, saying they had only gone on 2 dates, and he had ended things. According to William, their last interaction was in mid-March, when Anna, mistakenly, posted their engagement on Facebook, causing trouble with Michelle. When questioned about the trash found near his late fiancée, or the woman he dated, William admitted to littering, but claimed it was just KFC trash and a can from the general store, not related to Anna's death. About 40 miles separated the Alp General Store from the logging road. However, the investigators did not believe William's alibi. Lieutenant Chris Duffett, one of the investigators, quickly increased the pressure by revealing that William's trash had been discovered near a murder victim at a different location. Initially, William reacted with surprise and heartbreak, feigning disbelief that he was being questioned about a murder. 2 days after Anna Rapina's body was found, her fiancé William Hargrove was arrested for her murder on April 19th. During the investigation, Michelle was also questioned about her whereabouts on April 16th, the day Anna was killed. At first, Michelle stuck to a rehearsed alibi, claiming she and William had spent the day together, with William picking her up from her mother's house and going on a drive. However, Michelle later changed her story, admitting she had lied initially. She then claimed that she and William had planned to meet up, but he never called or showed up. When the police revealed that William was in custody for murder, Michelle's response was surprisingly calm, saying only, "Okay." The investigator pressed Michelle on her lack of emotion, which eventually broke down, and she tearfully attributed her initial calm to being in shock. William Hargrove was indicted on charges of murder, identity theft, and 2 counts of theft in June 2018. His trial began in October 2019, with the prosecution seeking the maximum penalties for each charge, while the defense argued for a more lenient sentence. William's defenders claimed he was innocent and that Melissa, the spurned lover, was the true culprit. However, the prosecution presented a strong case against William, backed by evidence and motive. The evidence showed that William was torn between 2 lovers, with Anna pressuring him to make a choice. There were records of William and Anna driving together in an Alon car. On the day of Anna's murder, William's cell phone was tracked to the logging road at 4:30 p.m. The shotgun used to kill Anna was found in William's car, with his fingerprints being the only ones on the weapon. Despite denying any involvement in Anna's death, William was caught using her money to go shopping and pay off his car insurance. He was even filmed withdrawing cash from an ATM using her card. The prosecution argued that William had driven Anna to the forest, gotten her out of the car, and then executed her with his shotgun. The prosecution claimed that William was faced with a choice between Anna and Michelle, leading to his actions. In contrast, the defense argued that their client was innocent. According to the prosecution, the evidence pointed to Melissa as the perpetrator. A threat from Melissa to build a snowman with Anna, her cell phone found near the logging road, and Anna's cell phone discovered in Melissa's house suggested that Melissa had planned the crime. Melissa, who was not charged with any crimes, testified as a witness for the prosecution. She revealed that she worked as a late-night cab driver and was married to an Oregon State University instructor, but their marriage was loveless and open. She met William at a bar where he worked and, with her husband's permission, began a romantic relationship with him. As they grew closer, William rented a room in her house. When Anna entered the picture, Melissa was not threatened, having a similar open relationship with William. Melissa explained that by her second visit, she couldn't tolerate the situation anymore, especially when she saw her own wedding ring on Anna's finger. Although she had given William an ultimatum, she had no role in William's actions that hurt Anna. Melissa clarified that she never intended for Anna to get hurt or killed. She denied the defense's allegations, stating that the threat about building a snowman was just a joke, a light-hearted family comment, even if it was a bit extreme. She acknowledged that her cell phone was found in the forest, but William was the one who drove her there. She didn't know why or what he planned. Furthermore, William had given her Anna's cell phone the day before he was questioned. As his partner, she naturally held onto it for him. Melissa's testimony lasted 14 hours, and she was not the only one. Around 70 other people testified, including Anna's mother, William's best friend and roommate, some of Melissa's family members, and others. Throughout the case, Melissa faced intense scrutiny, particularly in her hometown in Oregon, where she was criticized and ostracized by the locals. Michelle had reached a low point and attempted suicide, but fortunately, it was unsuccessful. The prosecutor praised Michelle's efforts to take responsibility, calling her actions tough and super tough. After a month of court appearances, the judge asked the jury to deliver their verdict. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours and returned with a decision. Despite the defense's efforts, they couldn't find Michelle guilty of Anna's death. There was no physical evidence linking Michelle to the crime scene or the weapon used. In fact, she had a solid alibi. She was celebrating Easter at her mother's house, and multiple witnesses could vouch for her presence. On the other hand, William maintained his not guilty plea, but the overwhelming evidence against him led to his conviction on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 25 years. Anna's attorney announced plans to appeal the verdict. Notably, the jurors developed a strong connection with each other during the trial. After the trial, they visited the logging trail, where Anna's life was tragically cut short, to pay their respects to her memory. Anna will be remembered as a courageous young woman who left her home in Russia to build a new life in the United States. Anna was a loving person who openly shared her love with others. She was cherished by many during her lifetime, and her memory will continue to be loved and honored. The prosecutor, Amy Matsko, stated, "Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Krista Baker Alexander. Krista Ann Baker was born on November 27, 1983, in Laurel and Jones County, Mississippi, to Pastor Winfred Baker and Patty Ann Baker. She was the youngest of 3 children, with 2 older brothers. When Krista was 8 years old, her family moved to Abota Springs, Louisiana, where they built a church and actively participated in its activities. Growing up, Krista traveled extensively with Christian missionary organizations to help those in need, particularly children. She was homeschooled and later pursued a degree in Christian education through online courses at the North Tennessee Bible Institute. Krista's passion was serving others, especially children, and she hoped to start her own family one day. However, her faith took priority, and she dreamed of finding a husband who shared her values. Krista adhered to traditional values and chose to save herself for marriage, only dating with the intention of finding a lifelong partner. During this time, she developed close friendships, including one with Cootie Alexander, a fellow youth pastor who shared her passion for missionary work. Cootie was a charismatic and well-liked individual in his community. Their families met through the church and maintained a good relationship. Cootie had been friends with Krista for many years before he asked her father, Winfred Baker, for permission to marry her. Her father happily agreed. During their courtship, Cootie and Krista followed church traditions and refrained from intimate contact. Krista had even told her parents that she wanted to save her first kiss with Cootie for their wedding day. While Krista helped her parents at church, Cootie was pursuing a career as a paramedic. A year later, they decided to get married. On March 1, 2008, they exchanged vows in front of their families and church members. The wedding was a joyful celebration, and Krista was a beautiful bride. However, their happiness was short-lived. Just 4 months after the wedding, tragedy struck. On June 29, 2008, Cootie returned home from a night shift at around 6 a.m. to find Krista lying face down on the floor. She was dead. Cootie immediately called the police. Krista's body was found near the front door, with no signs of a struggle. A bullet wound was discovered in the back of her head, with burn marks on her skin, indicating that the shot was fired at close range. The gunshot wound suggested that the gun was positioned at the back of Krista's head when the shot was fired. A 9mm shell casing was found on the floor next to her body. Initially, investigators thought the crime might have been a botched robbery. It was possible that someone broke into the house, assuming it was empty, and then killed Krista to avoid leaving a witness. Police had thoroughly searched the house. A jewelry box was found on the bed, the gun cabinet had been forced open, and Krista's purse was on the kitchen table, showing signs of having been rummaged through. Additionally, many drawers and cabinets were left open, suggesting that the perpetrator was looking for something of value. After completing their search of the house, police began interviewing individuals who had access to the property. Krista's husband, Cootie Alexander, was the first person they spoke with. However, he was too distraught to answer questions immediately, and investigators had to wait for him to compose himself. Once he was able to speak, Cootie reported that everything had seemed normal the previous night before he left for his overnight shift as an emergency medical technician with Caden Ambulance. He told that he called Krista multiple times throughout the night, but she didn't answer her phone. He also sent her several text messages, which she didn't respond to. Assuming she was just tired and had fallen asleep, he didn't think much of it. However, when he returned home the next morning, he was met with a disturbing scene. The front door was slightly open, and upon entering, he found their belongings scattered everywhere and Krista lying on the floor with a fatal gunshot wound to the head. He immediately checked her pulse and confirmed that she was dead. Panicked, he called 911 right away. The investigators were tasked with determining who could have entered the house while he was at work. It was possible that the perpetrator waited until Krista was alone before striking. They also explored the possibility that Krista may have let the killer into the house herself, as there were no signs of a struggle on her body or in the house. This suggested that she may have known her attacker and didn't feel threatened until it was too late. Cootie informed the investigators that a rifle and a shotgun were missing from the gun cabinet. What made the situation even more tragic was that Krista was 17 weeks pregnant, meaning that not only had he lost his wife, but also their unborn child. Cootie was overcome with grief and struggled to come to terms with the loss, unsure of how to move forward with his life. The case involved 2 victims, not one. The crime scene appeared unusual to investigators. The house was messy, but it didn't seem like the result of a typical burglary. Cabinets and drawers were open, but there was no evidence of rummaging or searching for specific items. It was as if the perpetrator wanted to mislead the police. The jewelry box was also open, but the jewelry was still intact, which raised suspicions. Krista's purse was open, yet all its valuable contents remained. The police noted that 2 firearms were missing from the house, but this was unusual because there were more firearms in the house that were not taken. This led investigators to wonder why the perpetrator didn't take all the available firearms. Based on these observations, investigators concluded that the crime scene was staged. It appeared that the perpetrator intended to kill Krista Alexander and then make it look like a robbery. As a result, the police began interviewing their neighbors to gather more information. This led to an unexpected lead in the case. Mavis Rabel, the 69-year-old neighbor and was landlord of the Alexanders, described they as quiet and recently married. They were active members of the Fundamental Baptist Church. Mavis remembered Krista Alexander as a kind and helpful woman who rarely went outside without her husband. Mavis last saw they on Saturday afternoon when Cootie Alexander was collecting the bodies of turtles he had shot in his backyard pond. This led investigators to discover that Cootie owned the gun. However, when police searched the Alexanders' home, they did not find a gun. Cootie claimed that only a rifle and a shotgun had been stolen from the house, but he never mentioned a handgun. Detectives suspected that Cootie might be hiding something. They searched the pond area and found several 9mm shell casings in the grass. These casings were similar to the one found near Krista's body. The police sent the casings to the state crime lab for analysis. The lab report confirmed that the gun Cootie used to shoot the turtles was the same gun used to shoot Krista. Investigators summoned Cootie to the police station for further questioning regarding his wife's death. He maintained that it was impossible for him to have committed the crime. Cootie explained that he had left for work at 5 p.m. on Saturday, June 28, 2008, and returned home the next morning at 6 a.m., providing an alibi that he was working throughout the night. Upon verification, Cootie's colleagues corroborated his claim, stating that he was indeed present at work all night. When inquired about the firearm, Cootie revealed that he owned a gun but claimed to have sold it the day prior to the incident to an unknown man named Steve. The alleged buyer had paid $500 in cash, which made verifying this claim difficult. According to Cootie, Steve was described as a white male in his mid-30s, around 6 feet 1 inch tall, driving an old Toyota pickup truck. Krista's parents shared their concerns with investigators, stating that they didn't believe Cootie's account of events. Her father, Winfred Baker, noted that Cootie showed little emotional response to Krista's death, a behavior that had started a few months before their wedding. They had been experiencing financial difficulties since moving in together, and the impending arrival of their child was likely to add to their struggles. Krista's parents also suspected that Cootie was having an affair with a colleague who had even attended their wedding. Krista had confided in friends just weeks before her death that she suspected Cootie was cheating on her. As investigators dug deeper into the marriage, they became increasingly convinced that Cootie and Krista had different visions for their future. However, was this enough motive for Cootie to take Krista's life, especially given that she was carrying their unborn child? The police had one lead, a man named Steve, who Cootie claimed had bought the gun used to kill Krista. Investigators set out to find Steve, using the description provided by Cootie. Meanwhile, they brought Cootie in for further questioning, asking him to provide a detailed account of his activities before, during, and after work on the day of Krista's death. This time, his story differed from his initial statement. The investigators found several inconsistencies in Cootie's story. He failed to mention a man named Steve, who was allegedly at his house, and to whom he had sold a gun. Additionally, while on duty, Cootie showed no concern for his pregnant wife Krista's well-being when she didn't answer his calls, despite knowing she was home alone. He could have asked a family member to check on her, but didn't. Furthermore, the crime scene appeared to have been staged, which raised suspicions about Cootie's involvement. As the investigators applied pressure, Cootie's story began to unravel. After several hours of interrogation, he changed his story entirely. He claimed that he had been sleeping on the couch before his night shift and that his wife had woken him up late. He stated that he wasn't angry with her for waking him up late and that it wasn't an issue. Cootie then explained that he had been walking around the house with a gun, intending to take it to work because a colleague was interested in buying it. He said he was fooling around, aiming the gun at objects and making click, click noises. He approached Krista from behind, put the gun to the back of her head, and claimed that an accidental shot occurred. He maintained that it was an accident and that he didn't intend to harm her. When he realized Krista was dead, he was scared and didn't know what to do. Cootie Alexander admitted to staging a crime scene to make it look like a robbery. He took several items from his house, including weapons and a DVD player, and drove to work with the front door left open. His plan was for someone to discover the open door and lights on, and then find his wife, Krista, while he was at work. However, this plan failed. On his way to work, Alexander threw a pistol and other items, including his wife's jewelry, out of the car window. By the time he arrived at work, the only items left in the car were a DVD player and a Sony radio. He gave the DVD player to a colleague, Allison Sharp, with whom he had been having an affair. Alexander and Sharp kissed and held hands before and after his wedding, spending one night at a Baton Rouge hotel. While his wife Krista was at church camp, he took Sharp to a hotel for a jacuzzi evening with fine china plates, meal and wine, amidst supposed financial difficulties with his low salary of $11 per hour and stalled professional certification efforts. County and his pregnant wife, Krista, were struggling financially and unemployed, and on top of that, their washing machine had broken. But Alexander managed to come up with money for a romantic evening at Callaway Inn with his mistress, Sharp. Police later determined that a shocking act unfolded in the home, contradicting Cootie's initial claim that Krista's death was accidental. Detectives found it difficult to prove direct involvement, but believed Cootie's explanation was suspicious. Despite the challenges, police were convinced that Krista's death was not an accident, and Cootie's actions raised more questions than answers. After the police arrested Cootie Alexander, Krista's parents were able to find the strength to forgive him. The Baker family came together to mourn the loss of their beloved daughter and what would have been their fourth grandchild. Krista's father, Winford Baker, remembered her fondly, saying, "She was a sweet and lovely person." Krista had made a significant impact on those around her, having completed 17 mission trips during her lifetime. Winford Baker recalled a conversation he had with Cootie shortly before his arrest. Although it was brief, Baker described the encounter as emotional, saying, "We hugged and cried together." Despite his desire for justice, Baker stated that he had already forgiven Cootie. "We forgave him even before we knew who was responsible," he said. Baker found comfort in knowing that Krista was now in a better place, saying, "She's with the Lord, in heaven, and at peace." The trial started on August 2, 2009. Prosecutors claimed that Cootie's behavior after Krista's death implied that he had acted on purpose. They wondered why he didn't call 911 right away if the shooting was truly an accident. Instead, Cootie faked a robbery and left Krista's body for 12 hours before going home and calling 911. Prosecutors also questioned Cootie's story that the shooting was accidental, noting that he was an experienced gun owner who had received proper training from his father. Cootie Alexander, 24, was charged with second-degree murder for the death of his wife, Krista. Cootie had admitted to being involved in her death, which he claimed was a result of his poor decision-making. After initially going to trial, Cootie suddenly changed his plea to guilty, ending jury deliberations. This unexpected turn of events came about when Krista's family agreed to a plea deal that had been proposed earlier. Alexander was sentenced to 55 years in prison in August 2009. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Christy Lynn Mullins. Christy Lynn Mullins was born on August 28, 1960, in Columbus, Ohio, one of 6 children in a large family. They lived in a quiet neighborhood, away from the noise and chaos of the city. In the summer of 1975, 14-year-old Christy spent most of her days socializing with friends and family, often going to the local neighborhood swimming pool. In late August, Christy babysat for a family friend on the evening of August 22nd. The next day, August 23rd, she woke up around noon and decided to go swimming to cool off. She invited her sister Kim to join her and they went to the residential area. While Kim went swimming, Christy relaxed on a deck chair. A short time later, Kim went ashore and found Christy nowhere to be seen, but Kim decided not to look for her and instead stayed at the pool. Surprisingly, when Kim returned home, Christy was not there. Hours passed and Christy still hadn't come home. Kim became even more worried. She decided to look for Christy and ran into a neighbor who told her that the police had found the body of a young woman a few miles away, but they had not been able to identify it. Kim rushed home to tell her parents, who immediately called the police to report Christy missing. It was very likely that the body found belonged to Christy, so the police directed them to the morgue for identification. Although it was difficult to recognize the identity of the body due to the severely bruised face, Christy's mother eventually accepted that the body was Christy's, her beloved daughter, thanks to the birthmark on her leg. Police later explained to the family what had happened. It turned out that at about 2:30 p.m. that same day, a man reported finding a body in the woods behind the local shopping center. He, his wife, and son had gone there to buy toys, but before entering the store, their son wanted to take a walk on the trail behind the building. This path was a popular walking path leading to a river and the area was famous for its beauty. Together with his parents, the son went for a walk on this trail. During their hike, they came across a disturbing scene about 10 yards down the trail. A man was kneeling on top of someone and repeatedly beating him with a wooden object. When he saw the family, he immediately ran away. The father rushed to the scene and found a seriously injured little girl covered in blood. His wife, who had medical training, checked the victim's pulse, but there was none. The father quickly went to a nearby shopping center and called the police from a store. He and his wife provided investigators with a detailed description of the suspect, who was a tall, slim young man with long black hair, wearing jeans shorts and boots, about 20 years old. Police created a sketch of the suspect based on their description and distributed it to patrol officers. However, the investigation of the crime scene yielded no results. The wooden object used as the murder weapon was found, but they discovered no other evidence linking the perpetrator. Notably, the victim's hands were tied with a telephone cord and her bikini top was pulled down. Her t-shirt and shoes were found next to her body. Despite these signs, forensic experts found no evidence that a sexual assault had occurred. Luckily, detectives were able to continue their investigation thanks to new information from Kim, who told them about a conversation between Christy and a friend, Carol. The police summoned Carol. Carol recounted to police a suspicious phone call she had received from a stranger claiming to be a local DJ. The man had called her to talk about a fake cheerleading competition at the state fair, which was supposedly being held behind the local shopping mall. He announced the event would start at 1:45 p.m. and had told Carol to wait for someone at the entrance to the forest trail. The police were skeptical about Carol's story, and when they dug deeper, they discovered many inconsistencies. According to Carol, she had originally planned to attend the event with her sister, but they had run into Christy and her sister on the way. Carol then invited Christy to join her and they left their sisters behind to go to the mall. However, when they arrived at the entrance to the woods, no one appeared and Carol claimed that she had gone to the shopping center to ask for the time. When she turned around, Christy was gone. The police investigation revealed that there had been no cheerleading competitions in town, casting doubt on the reason for Carol and Christy's trip to the woods. Police suspected that the mysterious phone call might have been a ruse to lure Carol into the woods, but they were unable to trace the call to identify the caller. Further investigation revealed discrepancies in Carol's story. She claimed to have met Christy and her sister on the street, but Kim said they had been at the pool and Carol had come to meet them there. Additionally, Christy's mother reported a strange conversation with Carol later that evening, which raised further suspicions. Carol apologized to Christy's mother and revealed that she had been the intended target of a murder involving two people. However, she quickly retracted her words and left. Christy's mother reported this to the police. The police questioned Carol again, but she denied making a statement and stuck to her original story. Carol was then given a polygraph test, which did not reveal any signs of deception when Carol answered key questions. As a result, investigators shifted focus away from Carol and pursued other leads. Police intensified their search for the killer 3 days after Christy's murder. A police officer patrolling the streets of Columbus spotted a man who bore a striking resemblance to a sketch of Christy's killer. Patrol officers quickly called detectives to the scene and asked Jack to accompany them to the station for questioning. The man, Jack Carman, 25, agreed to go with them. However, the police soon realized that Jack was severely mentally disabled, with an IQ of about 50 points. Results based on many different tests. As a result, Jack had limited communication skills and could not read or write. He was cared for by a specialist medical facility and lived in a supervised apartment. Despite these challenges, detectives could not ignore the striking resemblance between Jack and the composite sketch of the suspect in Christy's case. The interrogation process was extremely difficult due to Jack's limited ability to understand and answer questions. Most of the time, he just answered with one word or stayed silent. The detectives began to question whether Jack was capable of fully understanding their questions. To improve the situation, they had to ask very simple and specific questions. After 6 hours of questioning, detectives were finally starting to get results. They were finally able to extract a confession from Jack. According to his testimony, on the day in question he had left his apartment, taken the bus to the shopping center and bought a shirt and pants. As Jack walked through the parking lot, he saw Christy sitting on a fence near the entrance to a wooded trail. He approached her, tied her up by tying her hands, and then dragged her into the woods where he carried out the assault. After the attack, Christie tried to run away, but Jack quickly caught up with her. He picked up a nearby piece of wood and repeatedly hit her in the head. Jack then ran to the main road in front of the shopping center and boarded the bus. The next day, police took Jack to the forest where he allegedly committed the crime. There, he pointed out the exact spot and provided specific details that only the perpetrator would know, including the fact that the piece of wood used to strike the victim broke in half. Investigators also verified the testimony, asking the couple who found Christie to identify the person they had seen on the day of the incident. Both identified the man they had seen as Jack. As a result, Jack was charged with multiple offenses, including assault and murder. The prosecution chose to include it in the charges. The prosecutor initially sought the death penalty, but Jack's lawyer negotiated a deal. In exchange for a life sentence, Jack would plead guilty before the judge, thereby avoiding execution. The case moved swiftly, with thousands of people following. Just 11 days after the murder, on September 3rd, Jack was sentenced to life in prison. However, after the trial, public opinion began to shift, and many people started to question Jack's guilt. As more details about his confession and his background emerged in the media, people began to wonder whether he was truly capable of committing such a heinous crime. Those who knew Jack found it hard to believe that he was capable of the crime. He was a passive, timid, and compliant person who would agree to anything if pushed hard enough. In the past, he had even taken the blame for something he didn't do, like the time he claimed responsibility for breaking a boiler at a charity center, when in fact someone else was to blame. This behavior raised doubts about his ability to make a genuine confession to the crime. His supporters felt that the police must have manipulated him into confessing by feeding him information and asking pressured questions. For instance, if the police asked him if he hit the victim with a piece of wood, and he answered yes, they could use that as a confession. However, this approach can be unreliable, especially considering Jack's tendency to confess to anything when under threat. Even the mention of the electric chair was enough to make him agree to whatever the detectives wanted. Furthermore, the police took Jack to the crime scene at the same time as the witnesses, a married couple who later identified him at the police station. This raised concerns that the witnesses had been biased, as they had already seen Jack and knew he was a suspect, despite the police's claims that they never crossed paths. There were several red flags surrounding Jack's alleged involvement in the crime. For instance, the police failed to locate the bus driver or any passengers who claimed to have seen Jack on his way to the city center, which contradicted his own statement. Moreover, multiple people at the charity organization building where Jack lived and worked said to have seen him at around 1:30 p.m. This created a major timing issue. Even if Jack had left immediately after being seen by these witnesses, the bus ride to the shopping center on the outskirts of town would have taken at least 40 minutes. Given the crime was committed at 1:50 p.m., it was logistically impossible for Jack to have made it on time. This cast serious doubts about Jack's guilt and raised suspicions that the police may have coerced his confession. Christie's parents, too, began questioning whether Jack was the true culprit. At the height of the controversy, approximately 70 individuals gathered in front of City Hall on September 9th to draw attention to the case and advocate for a comprehensive investigation. They established a public committee aimed at securing justice for Jack. As a result, Jack was assigned a new lawyer, who swiftly petitioned for a case review. After several months, a judge dismissed Jack's original confession and ordered a new trial, putting the onus on the prosecution to establish his guilt from the beginning. This marked a daunting challenge for the prosecution, making their case almost unviable. Norman Mills, Christie's father, began his own investigation while preparations for the new trial were underway. Dissatisfied with the way the detectives had worked, Norman took matters into his own hands. Immediately after the murder, Norman, and several neighbors searched the area where Christie was found. They discovered a bloody pair of jean shorts and men's underwear in the woods. They turned the items over to the police, who had initially missed them. It was unclear whether these items were related to the case or if they had been examined for evidence. Jack's new trial began in 1977, 2 years after the murder. The defense had two tasks: first and foremost, to prove Jack's innocence and also to try to identify the real killer. In fact, they already had a pretty strong candidate for the role, who they considered to be the prime suspect. The man who found Christ's body along with his wife was Henry Newell, who was 25 years old at the time of the murder. At the beginning of the trial, Jack's lawyers had amassed an impressive list of reasons to suspect Henry of murder, and during the trial, the list grew even longer. Initially, Henry attracted attention because of his criminal record. Beginning in his teenage years, he had been arrested multiple times for various crimes, serving 3 prison sentences. He had successfully escaped from prison twice before being captured and brought back. At the time of Jack's trial, he was serving his 4th sentence, this time for burning down a house to collect insurance money. Lawyers also reviewed evidence from Christ's case and found some very suspicious details in his testimony. Henry said he had found her body, ran over, and threw a bloody piece of wood aside. He explained this by saying that he was in a state of shock at the time. But acting like that still seemed odd. Why did he pick up the murder weapon and throw it from his body for no apparent reason? He also testified that he thought the girl was still alive, so he took off his shirt and pressed it to her face. This action also raised questions. Did he actually try to stop the bleeding, or was his shirt stained with blood during the murder, and he needed to justify it somehow? Jack's lawyer found a store clerk in the mall where Henry had run to call the police. She said he was not wearing a shirt but was wearing jean shorts, although by the time police arrived, he was wearing a different pair of pants. The employee also confirmed that Henry had a new bruise on his face, as if someone had hit him. When asked why she didn't immediately report this to the police, she said no one had asked her. The officers themselves should have noticed this bruising but ignored it. Henry also agreed to take a polygraph test, but he ended up vomiting right on the machine. Another witness was Henry's neighbor, who said that on the night of the murder, he had talked to Henry and noticed many new scratches on his hands. The man also mentioned seeing a telephone cord in Henry's garage that was the same color and shape as the cord used to tie the victim's hands. That's not all. The neighbor said that Henry had once told him a very strange story. He claimed to know Christ's 14-year-old friend Carol and that they had once swum naked together in the pool. This story shocked everyone involved in the case. It turned out that Henry was acquainted with Carol, who was also directly involved in the case. His wife, Pam, also testified in court, saying everything had happened exactly as they told police on the first day. They had gone to the mall, and their son wanted to go for a walk. They went into the woods and found the body. Pam added that up until that point, Henry had remained at home and only stepped outside for a few minutes to scare away neighborhood children who had begun throwing firecrackers into their yard. Carol also testified, saying she had never met Henry. She was also asked about her intentions in telling Christ's mother that things should not have escalated to this point, but Carol again claimed she did not remember saying anything like that. Henry himself repeated his story without any changes and insisted that he had nothing to do with the crime. One of the most important moments of the trial was the showing of the entire recording of Jack's interrogation. After watching it, it became clear to everyone that Jack had simply been forced to confirm the detective's words that he had committed murder. Jack barely said anything and didn't seem to fully understand what the police wanted from him. But that was not the most important moment of the trial. On the 5th day, another unexpected witness appeared. It was Bobby, Henry's stepson, and his testimony truly shocked everyone following the case. Bobby revealed that that day, Henry had indeed gone out of the house to chase away the children who had thrown firecrackers into the yard. When Henry returned home, his shirt and sandals were missing, and Henry had scars on his hands and face. Bobby was told by his parents that they would be going to the shopping center, but when they arrived, they instead took him on a walk in the woods behind the center. Bobby claims he never asked to go for a walk, which contradicts what his parents initially said. During the walk, they found Henry's torn sandal and then Christie's body. Bobby's mother instructed him not to tell anyone about what he saw. At the trial, Bobby's grandmother testified about a disturbing comment made by Henry during Christie's farewell ceremony. After expressing her sadness about Christie's death, Henry replied, "It will teach her to keep her mouth shut." Another witness, Henry's friend, came forward and said that Henry had confessed to him that he accidentally killed Christie. Although the evidence clearly pointed to Henry's involvement, the prosecutor surprisingly announced that they would not pursue a case against Henry. The prosecutor also claimed that the initial investigation was handled correctly, despite acknowledging that the police missed or ignored many clues from the beginning. The public was outraged by this decision, leading the prosecutor to change his mind 2 days later and agree to reopen the investigation into Christie's death. Christie's father refused to give up on seeking justice and filed a civil lawsuit against Jack, but not because he believed Jack was involved in the murder. Rather, he hoped to gain access to the case files and gather more information. Unfortunately, this effort also proved unsuccessful. The case had remained stagnant until 2013, when Henry died of terminal cancer. Despite this, in the same year, former attorney John Aller became interested in the case and conducted his own investigation. He contacted all parties involved in gathering new information. Christie's relatives had provided John with a box of records that Christie's father had collected. After reviewing the records and talking to dozens of people, John believed that Henry was the culprit behind Christie's murder. John's investigation revealed that Carol had bought marijuana from Henry, which made him suspect that Henry was involved in the crime. This new discovery created a possible connection between Henry and Carol, which could explain why Carol brought Christie to the forest. One theory is that Carol planned to meet Henry in the forest to buy an illegal substance. It's possible that Carol invited Christie along, using the DJ story as a cover. A more sinister explanation suggests that Carol brought Christie to the forest at Henry's request, intending for him to harm her. However, Christie resisted, as evidenced by Henry's injuries, and he ultimately killed her. When John took over the case, Henry had passed away from cancer at the age of 63. However, John continued his work and released a book about Christie's murder. The release of the book sparked a new wave of interest, and Christie's relatives demanded that the investigation be reopened. Some of Henry's relatives also confirmed that Henry was the one who killed the girl. This led to the reopening of the murder investigation in May 2014. Detectives re-examined the evidence, interviewed dozens of people, and reassessed Henry's confession. They re-examined Christie's clothes and found traces of semen, but they were too small for DNA analysis. The investigation lasted until late 2015, when detectives announced that Henry was the one who had committed the crime. But because he had passed away, the case could not go to court. The investigation ended with the conclusion that Henry had left home, gone to the road behind the shopping center, seen Christie alone, and decided to assault her with a telephone cord, taking her deep into the woods. Henry had attacked Christie, injuring her. Then he killed her with a piece of wood. Returning home, Henry recounted the incident to his wife, and the two began to make plans to avoid punishment. For many years afterward, Carol never revealed the truth. Police later apologized to Christie's family for their careless handling of the incident. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kirti Vyas. Kirti Vyas, a 28-year-old resident of Mumbai, lived with her family in a Bharatnagar residence on Grand Road. After completing her education, she worked in the finance department at a famous beauty salon in Andheri West, Mumbai. On March 16, 2018, Kirti followed her daily routine, leaving her house at 7 a.m. to head to the office. Her two friends were already waiting for her in their car, and together they drove to work. However, Kirti failed to return home that evening, and her family was unable to contact her as her phone was switched off. Concerned, they reported her disappearance to the police. Despite an extensive 50-day search, there was no trace of Kirti. It wasn't until the police conducted a thorough investigation that they found a crucial clue, a drop of blood, which ultimately led them to uncover the truth behind her disappearance. Kirti's family members were busy with their tasks when, around 11:30 a.m., her mother tried to contact her to ask for the Wi-Fi password at home. However, she couldn't reach Kirti because both of her mobile phones were switched off. Assuming Kirti was busy at work, her mother thought she had turned off her phones and focused on her own tasks. Later that evening, Kirti's family grew worried when she didn't come home on time. They called her office and were surprised to learn that Kirti hadn't come to work that day and her phone was consistently switched off. Distressed, they contacted Kirti's close friends, who said they had last spoken to her the previous night. The family then began searching for Kirti in the vicinity, but despite their efforts, her whereabouts remained unknown. The entire night passes, but Kirti fails to return home. The following day, overcome with exhaustion and defeat, Kirti's family files a report of her disappearance at the DB Road police station. After registering the case, the police investigation team visits Kirti's office to gather information about her. They also question her friends. During the interrogation, two of Kirti's friends, Tamna and Kushi Sahajwani, informed the police that they dropped Kirti at Grand Road Station on the day she went missing, as per her request, while they were driving her to the office. To verify their statements, the police examined the CCTV footage outside Kirti's house. The footage clearly shows Kirti leaving her house around 9 a.m. on the morning of March 16, 2018. Tamna and Kushi Sahani were already waiting with their car, and Kirti gets in. They then drive away. Since this was the last time Kirti was seen with her friends, the police asked Tamna and Kushi Sahani to join the investigation team and provide any information they have about Kirti, no matter how small, and details about the events of March 16, 2018. The 28-year-old finance manager, Kirti, has disappeared, and the Mumbai police have yet to uncover any clues about her whereabouts. She was last spotted outside her building, getting into an SUV owned by her colleague. According to her colleague, he dropped her off at Lamington Road. As Kirti was last seen with Siddesh and Kushi, the police initially suspected their involvement in her disappearance. Both have been cooperative with the authorities, assisting in the investigation. Despite days of scrutiny, the police have found no evidence to implicate them. In fact, Siddesh and Kushi have even launched social media campaigns on Facebook and Twitter to help locate Kirti. As a result, the police have cleared them of any suspicion. However, the police are still faced with a daunting task of finding Kirti, whose disappearance remains a mystery. The crime branch had already verified CCTV footage outside Kirti's home, which confirmed that Siddesh and Kushi gave Kirti a lift in their car heading towards the office. However, they claimed to have dropped Kirti near Grand Road Station, but the CCTV footage around that area had not been checked earlier. The crime branch then immediately began scrutinizing the CCTV footage around the station. Additionally, they investigated the CCTV footage from Siddesh Tamana and Kushi Sahajwani's car. A surprising revelation emerged. Neither Kushi, Siddesh, nor Kirti appeared in any CCTV footage around or at the station. Moreover, the CCTV in Siddesh Tamana's car did not confirm that they went towards the station on March 16, 2018. When questioned by the crime branch, Siddesh and Kushi initially claimed to have dropped Kirti at Grand Road Station, but the CCTV evidence contradicted their statement. Later, they changed their story, saying that Kirti had initially asked to be dropped at the station, but then requested to get down near Navjivan Society, which is why they did not reach the station. The prime suspects had repeatedly changed their statements, arousing the policeman's suspicion. As a result, they kept a close eye on both of them. In addition to this, their phone records were checked, but nothing suspicious was found. Consequently, both individuals remained at large for nearly 50 days. Despite Kirti's disappearance without a trace, it seemed as though there would be no leads on their whereabouts. However, the police received a forensic report that completely altered the course of the case. It was discovered that when Kushi, Siddesh, and Kirti were last seen leaving the office on March 16, 2018, the police had immediately sent the car they used for forensic examination. The forensic lab's report revealed that a drop of blood was found in the car's trunk. After subjecting this drop of blood to a DNA test and matching it with a sample from Kirti's parents, it was confirmed that the blood found in the car belonged to Kirti. The presence of Kirti's blood in the car was now revealing a lot. After this revelation, the police take Siddesh Tamanar and Kushi Sahajwani into custody again and begin a rigorous interrogation. Both of them initially claim that they dropped Kirti off on the way and do not know her whereabouts. However, when the police confront them about a drop of Kirti's blood found in the car's trunk, they are unable to provide a clear explanation. Under intense questioning, they eventually crack and start revealing the truth. The truth is shocking. It emerges that KY worked as a finance manager at B. Blunt Salon, while Kushi Sahajwani was Kirti's junior, and Siddesh Tamanar worked as an account executive. Siddesh Tamanar had been employed at the salon for a long time, with decent performance, but had been failing to meet his targets for the past few months, accompanied by continuous errors in his work. As a result, Kirti issues a notice to Siddesh Tamanar, warning him to either improve his performance by March 16, 2018, or face termination. In this notice, Siddesh Tamanar, 28, informs his colleague, 42-year-old Kushi Sahajwani, who works with him. Unbeknownst to others, a romantic relationship had developed between Kushi and Siddesh at the office, despite Kushi being already married. When Kirti issued the notice to Siddesh, Kushi became fearful that she would also lose her job, since Siddesh had failed to improve his performance in March. In response, Kushi and Siddesh concoct a sinister plan. They call Kirti and ask her to meet them at the office, and instead of taking the train, Kirti gets into their EOS sports car. En route, they demand that Kirti not terminate Siddesh's employment. But Kirti responds that the decision would be made at the office meeting. When they don't get their way, the two start physically fighting with Kirti inside the car. During the struggle, Siddesh and Kushi use a scarf to strangle Kirti, keeping her restrained for an extended period, ultimately resulting in her death inside the car. After Kirti's death, the two concoct a plan to discreetly dispose of the body, making it seem like nothing is amiss. They install a sunroof in the car, placing Kirti's body inside, and then head to the office. Upon their return, they drive the car to a secluded area, where they dismember Kirti's body into 3 pieces, all within the vehicle. They subsequently dispose of the pieces in different locations. After securing the evidence, they visit a nearby car wash to thoroughly clean their vehicle, inside and out. From there, they proceed to Kirti's house, where they join forces with her family to stage a search effort, thereby avoiding suspicion. Siddesh and Kushi even launch an online campaign to find Kirti and personally visit the police, ensuring that no doubts are raised. Despite their confidence in evading detection, their luck takes a dramatic turn when the car cleaner's negligence leaves behind a trace of Kirti's blood in the trunk, ultimately exposing the entire incident. Following the full disclosure, Siddesh Tamanar and Kushi Sahajwani are charged with severe offenses, including kidnapping, misleading the police, destroying evidence, and murder. They are subsequently arrested and imprisoned. Currently, regarding the status of this case, Kushi Sahajwani has been released on bail, while Siddesh Tamana remains behind bars. The police have yet to recover Katie's remains. As the Mumbai crime branch continues to search for the body of 28-year-old Kirti Vas, who was murdered on March 16th, they suspect that the body might have been dumped in the area. The search operation is ongoing. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Georgina Simons. Georgina, an effervescent and determined escort, inhabited a world steeped in affluence and grandeur. Yet, beneath the veneer of sophistication and splendor, lurked a labyrinth of falsehoods and manipulation, ultimately leading to her premature demise. She was always fascinated with her appearance, and this preoccupation intensified over time. Seeking more space for their family, Georgina, Pete, and Emily found a small terraced house and moved in, enjoying a steady income and financial security. Money was not a concern for them. Pete found success working in the electric vehicle industry, while Georgina, feeling unsatisfied with her 9-to-5 job in the loan industry, sought alternative career paths. She confided in her friends, expressing her belief that the traditional 9-to-5 workday was not a good fit for her. Eventually, Georgina began supplementing her income by working as a burlesque dancer in a bar and later for an escort service. Both roles appealed to her due to the attention they provided. However, it was during her tenure at the agency that her life took a significant turn. In May 2012, at the age of 20, Georgina crossed paths with Peter Morgan, then 49, a well-to-do real estate developer who lived near where she resided. Peter led a life of affluence, happily married to Helen and a devoted father to their 2 children. His wealth originated from a multi-million-pound property portfolio, which notably included a stately windmill situated on a sprawling 300-acre estate that he shared with his parents and brother. Peter's childhood was marked by early exposure to farming equipment and machinery. By the age of 10, he had become adept at operating tractors and motorcycles. Opting out of formal education, he remained within the family business until the age of 34, indulging in a lifestyle where money was of little concern. Peter acknowledged a singular lapse in judgment, an encounter with a sex worker in Amsterdam, but otherwise maintained his dedication to his marriage. However, a perceived midlife crisis in his 40s led him to use technology such as smartphones to engage with sex workers through escort agencies. In his own words, Peter appreciated the transactional nature of his encounters, describing the appeal of being able to have sex, shake hands, and leave. However, everything shifted when he crossed paths with Georgina. She stood out from the others, unexpectedly captivating Peter's heart. Before Georgina, Peter had been frequently visiting different sex workers, with the encounters becoming weekly over time. While overseeing the renovation of a lighthouse for his real estate ventures, Peter showered Georgina with lavish gifts, including a Range Rover worth over $112,000 and an $11,000 shopping spree. He even paid her $1,000 for a single night together. Georgina enjoyed the attention and luxurious lifestyle, but exclusivity in her relationship with Pete remained elusive. She continued to see other clients while maintaining a romantic relationship with Pete. Unlike her arrangement with Peter Morgan, he harbored deep resentment towards Georgina's involvement with other individuals, despite their lack of romantic commitment. By 2015, he had persuaded Georgina to work exclusively as his personal escort, providing her with monthly payments ranging from $7,000 to $10,000. During this time, Peter was overseeing the renovation of his Grade 2 listed castle, including Castle Bungalow, a cottage on its grounds where Georgina relocated as part of their arrangement. She resided in the cottage over time. Peter confided in Georgina about his emotions and aspirations for the future. He decided to end his 22-year marriage to Helen, ensuring her financial stability while allowing Georgina to retain occupancy of the cottage. This turn of events left Pete's former partner and father of their daughter devastated, feeling as though he had lost the woman he loved. In August 2015, the couple embarked on a trip to Africa, yet Pete couldn't shake the feeling of Georgina slipping away from him. The thought of her being with other men, particularly someone as affluent as Peter Morgan, plunged him into a deep depression. Despite understanding Peter's ability to provide Georgina with a lavish lifestyle that made a strong impression on her, Pete felt powerless in comparison to Peter's wealth. Pete's mother, Lynn, reflected on this time, noting that at this point, Pete was happy to be with her, and he earned enough money for them both to have a good life and do what they wanted. She thought he put up with a lot, as she never knew anything else was going on. Morgan occupied a significant place in his life. He was constantly on his mind, and the feelings were intensifying within him. However, Pete cared too much about his mother to talk about these issues. On November 15, 2015, Pete Deem vanished following a heated argument with Georgina regarding text messages. Tragically, he was later discovered deceased by hanging in a wooded area. 2 days later, Alexei Butcher, a friend of Georgina's, succinctly summed up the situation. Rich Pete was completely smitten. He loved and cherished her, envisioning a future together. However, it seemed Georgina was only interested in him for his wealth. It is doubtful that she ever truly cared for him, even though she claimed to have left poor Pete for him. Her intentions were always to exploit rich Pete for as much as she could before returning to poor Pete. Adding to Georgina's distress, she had lost her father to suicide just a few months before Pete's death. Despite the hardships she faced, it was clear that she genuinely cared for Pete, like many others did. However, she would have to confront the devastating realization that her own actions contributed to his untimely demise. The news of Pete's death deeply affected Georgina, causing a significant shift in her personality. She blamed Peter for Pete's passing and became increasingly intolerant of his obsessive and controlling behavior. Furthermore, she held Peter accountable for having to deal with social services regarding her daughter's well-being. Georgina publicly criticized Peter in front of his friends and family, which angered him. Peter was frustrated that even with Pete gone, he could not have Georgina entirely to himself. Later, he would recollect that Georgina had almost succeeded in terminating her own life by slashing her wrists in the bathtub. Peter recounted that she was submerged in the water and he pulled her out. Following the demise of her former partner, she was regularly consuming drugs and alcohol. She held him accountable for Pete's death, making him feel culpable and asserting that it was entirely his fault. Tensions between Georgina and Peter Morgan escalated further after Pete's funeral in December 2015, when Georgina began dating Tom Ballinger, a friend of Pete's. Enraged, Peter started taking Georgina's phone to read her texts. He had also planted a listening device disguised as a white plug adapter in the cottage, making a total of 514 calls to it, allowing him to eavesdrop on every one of her phone conversations. One night in January 2016, Peter overheard a conversation in the bugged cottage that shook him to the core. Georgina was confiding in Tom Ballinger about her scheme to blackmail Peter into relinquishing the cottage. She disclosed her intention to relocate to London, where she could pursue her escorting career and significantly increase her earnings from upscale clients. Upon hearing this, Peter's heart sank, grappling with the realization that Georgina might not be committed to their relationship. She issued dire threats of exposing damaging information about him to the public, convinced she could ruin him. Georgina alleged that Peter concealed $50,000 in cash at home to evade taxes and was involved in constructing buildings that failed to meet code standards. Furthermore, she claimed to possess evidence on her phone indicating that Peter engaged with sex workers while still married to his wife. After 3 years of dating Georgina, Peter was aware of the explicit photographs and videos documenting their participation in group sexual activities, as well as intimate moments in the marital bed at his residence. He also knew that Georgina had successfully blackmailed at least 3 of her former clients. The realization that Georgina posed a serious threat to his reputation and livelihood left Peter with no choice but to consider extreme actions to protect himself. Fearing the catastrophic consequences of Georgina's blackmailing tactics, Peter considered eliminating her as a solution. He carefully planned this by meticulously creating a detailed list of necessary items using the Notes app on his iPhone. On January 12, 2016, Alexei, a friend of Georgina's, contacted the Welsh authorities. Later that same day, Alexei and Georgina made plans for a playdate for their daughters. However, Georgina failed to arrive to pick up her child from school, as arranged. When the police arrived at the cottage, both Alexei and Georgina's mother were present along with Peter. Peter informed the officers that Georgina had been struggling recently, turning to alcohol and drugs to cope with the grief of losing her father and ex-boyfriend Pete. He expressed concern that Georgina may have harmed herself, speculating that she could be in the woods behind the home. Despite a search of the area, Georgina was not found. Due to her mental state, authorities classified Georgina as a high-risk missing person. In the end, Peter admitted to the police that he had intervened and taken Georgina's phone from her, fearing she intended to use it to arrange a drug transaction. Furthermore, information gathered from Georgina's family and friends revealed that Peter was deeply infatuated with her, whereas she viewed their relationship solely as a business arrangement. Alexei informed the authorities that Georgina had decided to terminate her association with Peter and was looking forward to the future. Peter was brought in for questioning after the police located the phone. After prolonged interrogation, he eventually confessed to strangling Georgina and burying her body on the property. Law enforcement officers found Georgina's remains concealed beneath farm machinery, bound with rope and with an orange string tied around her neck, indicating she had been strangled. Georgina's handbag, vehicle, and house keys were discovered discarded in the trash, along with her high heels. Additionally, the police uncovered Peter's listening device, which he claimed he had installed to ensure Georgina's safety. However, call logs for Peter revealed that the listening device had been utilized 514 times between 2015 and 2016. Ultimately, Peter justified his purchase of the listening device by claiming he believed Georgina was exploiting him. He alleged that he had overheard Georgina discussing plans to blackmail him into surrendering the cottage. Peter carefully compiled a shopping list on his phone as a reminder of the items he needed to purchase, which included a polytarp, a handle, snips, string, tape, gloves, a plug, and a bag, tools later used in Georgina's murder. Furthermore, the police obtained footage from the farm's security system that captured Peter's arrival and exit from the vehicle, as well as the concealment of Georgina's body. The authorities speculated that Peter was unaware that his wife had installed the cameras after his departure on January 14, 2016. Peter was formally charged with murder, and his trial began on November 28, 2016. During the trial, he pleaded not guilty. The prosecution argued that Peter's obsession with Georgina led him to meticulously plan and carry out her murder. In contrast, Peter's defense asserted that his Asperger's disorder impaired his ability to fully comprehend the consequences of his actions, which could mitigate his culpability. Despite testimony from 2 doctors, the prosecution's expert disagreed with this assessment. Ultimately, the jury found Peter guilty of murder on December 21st, and he received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In October 2017, Peter filed an appeal against his conviction and imprisonment. However, the appeal was dismissed in March 2018. The unexpected death of Georgina deeply affected her family and friends, plunging them into deep grief. Her vibrant personality, now a treasured recollection, stands as a poignant reminder of a life cut short by this tragic event. The community came together in a display of unity, offering sincere support to Georgina's family and friends as they grappled with their sorrow. Their steadfast presence served as a powerful testament to the resilience that can be found in the collective strength of a community facing hardship. Though Georgina's life was tragically short-lived, her legacy continues to live on in the hearts of those who cherished her. May her memory inspire others to savor every moment and appreciate the preciousness of life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Anu Singh. A man named Sam, who lived with his wife and son in Melbourne, Australia, came to his home in the state of Kerala, India to visit his parents in October 2015. However, before returning to Melbourne, he told his parents and some relatives, "Maybe the next time I come to India, it will be in a coffin." Surprisingly, 3 days later, news arrived that Sam had died. Everyone wonders how someone could predict their own death. But when the true story came to light, 2 major cities in different countries were shaken. So what was the full story behind this case? Let's dive into the details. In 2015, a 34-year-old man named Sam Abraham lived with his wife Sophia and their 7-year-old son in Epping, a suburb of Melbourne, Australia. The family had previously lived in Oman, a country in West Asia, but they moved to Melbourne because it is considered the most livable city in Australia. Both Sam and Sophia were employed, and the small family of 3 was happily residing in Australia. Every year, Sam would visit his home in India with his family. In October 2015, Sam and Sophia took some days off from work and came to India. One day, Sam told his father, "I feel like I won't live for much longer. Maybe I will die soon." After hearing this, Sam's father gets angry and says, "You are so young. Why are you saying such strange things?" Despite this, one day, Sam tells some of his relatives, "Maybe the next time I come to India, it will be in a coffin." This remark also seemed strange to them, but everyone brushed it off as a joke. Sam had a flight back to Australia on October 11th, 2015, as he and his wife had taken only a few days off from work to visit India. After this, Sam returns to Australia with his wife and son. However, just 2 days later, on the morning of October 15th, 2015, Sam's father, Abraham, receives a call on the other end of the line from his daughter-in-law, Sophia, who delivers devastating news that shocked the entire Abraham family. Through tears, Sophia explains that Sam had passed away that morning due to a heart attack. Sophia, left alone in Australia, handles all the paperwork and finally gets permission to send Sam's body back to India. This process takes 2 to 3 days, and on October 18th, Sam's body arrives in Kerala, India. Along with Sam's dead body, Sophia, their 7-year-old son, and Sophia's sister Sonia also come to India. However, some of Sam's relatives, especially his father, are deeply shocked because everything Sam had said came true. The house is engulfed in grief. Sam's wife is now a widow, and their 7-year-old son has lost his father. With a heavy heart and deep sorrow, Sam's body was buried and his last rites were performed. Everyone at home was very sad, especially Sophia, whose life had taken a huge blow. Despite this, she had to return to Australia after 5 days because they had come to India on leave from their respective jobs. If Sophia had stayed in India longer, she could have lost her job. Therefore, on October 23rd, Sophia went back to Australia with her sister Sonia and her son. However, after returning to Australia, Sophia called her in-laws every Saturday to check on how they were doing. Time passed slowly, but there wasn't a single Saturday when Sophia didn't call her in-laws. But then, suddenly, in the last week of July or the first week of August 2016, there were no calls from Sophia to India. Seeing this, Sam's family became very worried, so they called some acquaintances in Australia to get information about Sophia. What Sam's family found out was shocking. They learned that Sophia had been in the custody of the Victoria Police for the past 15 to 20 days. Additionally, Sam's family found out that Sophia was charged with murder because the police suspected that she had killed her own husband, Sam Abraham. After this revelation, Sam's family is left stunned. However, the name of another man, Aaron Kamalasanan, comes up in the story. Sam's family heard this name for the first time, and it was then that they learned whether the accusations against Sophia were true or false. On the other hand, The Victoria Police presented some evidence to Sophia and Aaron, after which both confessed to murdering Sam. Following this confession, Sophia tells the police a story that leaves them astonished. The story goes like this. In the Kollam district of the state of Kerala, there is a small village named Kavalur, where Sophia and Sam lived. In this vast state of Kerala, Kavalur is just a small village where Sam and Sophia's houses were close to each other. They knew each other since childhood because they went to school together and were in the same class. Additionally, they both had a bit of interest in music, so they sang together in the church's choir group. Not only that, but after completing high school, they also joined college together. Eventually, they fell in love during their college days and started spending their time together like a normal college couple. However, in their relationship, Sophia fell in love with another guy named Oren. Sophia neither let Sam know about Oren, nor let Oren know about Sam. But in the end, Sophia decided to marry Sam. After that, Sam first informed his family that he liked Sophia and wanted to marry her. However, Sam was standing shocked when his father said that he couldn't marry Sophia, although Sophia's father was a retired defense officer and Sophia's family was respectable in society. Sam's father still refused the marriage for some unknown reason. When Sophia found out, she threatened both Sam and her family that she would take her own life if she couldn't marry Sam. When Sam's family learned of this, they took the matter seriously and decided to let Sam and Sophia get married. Afterward, both Sam and Sophia were very happy, and their wedding was celebrated with great enthusiasm. They got married in 2008, and in 2009, Sam moved to Oman with his wife Sophia because he had gotten a job at a money exchange company. However, when Sophia became pregnant, she returned to India because she needed her family's support. At that time, she gave birth to a son in India, and while staying in India, she was in constant contact with her sister. After some time, Sophia decided to move to Australia for a better life. Sophia had an MSc degree in electronics, so her sister also encouraged her, saying she should come to Australia, as she would get a great job. After seeing Sophia's resume, a company in Melbourne offered her a job, and she left for Australia with her son. Sophia arrived in Melbourne in the early months of 2012. Soon after, Sam also decided that he would move to Australia after some time. He talked to his company and got his transfer to Australia. Sam reached Australia in 2013, and their small family of 3 now lives under the same roof. The plus point of living here was that their son had grown up, and both husband and wife were working in different companies, so everything was going well in their lives. However, there was a different story behind this. Before Sophia moved to Australia, Oren had already gone there to Melbourne. Oren started working as an instrumentation engineer at a company. Oren got married there and also had a child by then. Sophia was also married, and Oren had his own family, so they should not have been in contact with each other. But despite being married, Sophia and Oren continued to talk through chatting apps and calls. In fact, Sophia's main reason for moving to Australia was that Oren was there, and they could meet in person. But when Sam joined his family in Australia, it became difficult for Sophia and Oren to meet. Despite this, Sophia continued to talk to Oren secretly. One day, Sophia had the idea that if Sam were to die somehow, she could be with Oren. She shared this idea with Oren, and he liked it because he loved Sophia deeply. After that, Oren started looking for an opportunity to kill Sam. During this time, he kept a close watch on Sam's every activity, and Sophia helped him with this. Then, in February 2015, Oren finally got the chance he was waiting for. One day in February, Sam was sitting in his car, parked outside a metro station. During this time, a masked Oren approached him and attacked him with a knife, slashing his throat and cheek. However, Sam survived the attack, and fortunately for Oren, he was not identified by the police and therefore was not caught. When Sam came home after surviving the knife attack, Sophia told Oren about it. The two then began to think of another way to kill Sam easily. They came up with many ideas on how to kill Sam, but they finally decided to use cyanide. They then started looking for cyanide, and on October 14th, Sophia mixed cyanide into Sam's orange juice and gave it to him. Sam, thinking it was just normal orange juice, drank it. Later, he lay down on his bed, but the poor Sam never got up again. Then, Sophia immediately messaged Aaron and called him to her house. The first thing Aaron checked was whether Sam was alive or dead. To make sure, Aaron forcibly poured the remaining juice from the glass into Sam's mouth. After doing this and seeing Sam, Aaron realized he was dead and left Sophia's house. Afterward, Sophia slept the whole night on the same bed with her son, where her husband's dead body was lying. As soon as morning came, she started crying loudly, and hearing Sophia's cries, some neighbors came to her house. Sam was then taken to the hospital, but upon arrival, the doctor declared him dead. On hearing this, Sophia started crying a lot, but it was all an act. During this time, Sophia called Sam's father and told him that Sam had died of a heart attack. Whenever anyone asked Sophia the cause of Sam's death, she would say they all went to sleep after dinner. But when she tried to wake Sam up in the morning, he wouldn't get up. Maybe he had a silent attack. After this, no one suspected anything, and Sophia quickly began arranging to take Sam's dead body to India. She likely knew that if an autopsy was conducted here, the cause of death would be clearly determined. Therefore, the doctors believed Sophia's story and recorded the cause of death as a heart attack in their report. And within 3 days, Sam's dead body reached India. Now, in India, no one in Sam's family suspected Sophia because she was crying a lot at Sam's funeral, which made everyone think that she was very sad about Sam's passing. There is a team of 5 people who work hard to bring you the best quality content through thorough research. If you appreciate our efforts, you can support us according to your preference by visiting the link provided in the description. Your small support will motivate us to work effectively on the channel. Thank you. Now, let's continue with the story. Sam's toxicology report revealed that there was cyanide in his blood and liver, causing his death. About 10 months after Sam's death, on August 12, 2016, the Victoria police arrived at Sophia and Aaron's house to arrest them. However, during the search of Sophia's house, the police found a diary, but the diary was written in Malayalam, a language spoken and written in Kerala, so the police sent it to be translated. Afterward, the trial of this case began, and then the police presented Sophia and Aaron's call recordings. Some of their chats, Sophia's diary translated into English, and Aaron's recording before the judge. This was the same recording in which Aaron had told the detective that he had committed a murder by poisoning a man. According to a Melbourne-based newspaper, the diary found at Sophia's house sometimes belonged to Sophia and sometimes to both of them, and they used to write their feelings in this diary. One entry in this diary by Sophia says, "Can you hold me tight? I want to drift away in your love." In addition, Aaron had also written, "She is the best match for me, but what to do? I am sure that one day she will be mine." After this, the Supreme Court of Victoria delivered its verdict. Aaron is sentenced to 24 years, during which he will not be eligible for parole before 21 years. On the other hand, Sophia is sentenced to 22 years, during which she cannot be paroled before 18 years. However, during this trial, Sophia broke down in court and said, "I have a small son, so please reduce my sentence." But then the judge remarked, "The unfortunate part is that the biggest victim in this crime is your son, because you killed his father, and now you are also going to be sentenced." After that, the court awarded custody of the child to Sophia's sister, Sonia. But later, Sam's family demanded to keep their grandson with them, and now Sam's son lives with his grandparents' family. However, there is no information about Aaron's wife and his child in this case, so we cannot say anything about them. During this time, neither Aaron's family nor Sophia's parents seem to have any hint that they know each other. So with that, the Sam Abraham murder case comes to an end. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Karina Vetrano. The story of Karina Vetrano is both horrifying and baffling. Firstly, nothing seemed amiss on the day of the fateful event. the attack occurred in broad daylight in a fairly populated area. Secondly, her death has critical aspects to it. Thirdly, the investigation and sentencing of the perpetrator raised many questions. On Tuesday, August 2nd, 2016, Karina arranged to meet her father after work to spend time together. Since Miss Vetrano had moved away, family gatherings had become rare because everyone was busy with their own matters. In addition to her commitments, she was balancing two jobs. Philip picked up his daughter and took her home. There, the family shared their impressions of the past week. When Karina was about to leave, she asked if her father wanted to go jogging with her, as they often did, covering several miles together. Her father replied that he couldn't this time due to severe back pain that nothing seemed to alleviate. Perhaps he needed a new prescription, or maybe it was just the change in weather. Mr. Vetrano offered to call a cab for Karina due to his discomfort and inability to join her run. However, the weather was beautiful, the heat had abated, and there was a fresh scent in the air, hence Karina declined his offer. She was training for the upcoming marathon. The young woman had recently broken up with her boyfriend and wanted to distract herself. A jog would clearly do her good. That evening was the last time her parents saw their youngest daughter. At 5:45 p.m., she left the house for a jog. Her first stop was Spring Creek Park, a cozy and tranquil place buried in greenery, a true paradise amongst the city's infrastructure. However, only part of the park was available for walking. The rest was covered with thickets and swamps. Mr. Vetrano asked his daughter to stick to her usual route and stay away from unfamiliar paths and people. Unfortunately, Karina ignored his advice in search of solitude. She decided to go to a grassy, deserted place. Karina's thoughts were abruptly interrupted. She felt a sharp pain in the back of her head and fell down. This rash decision cost the young woman her life. A frightening uncertainty entered the Vetrano home. It had been 2 hours since they had said goodbye to their youngest daughter. She should have been home by now, or at least answering the calls of her parents, who were frantically trying to reach her, and she had promised to keep her cell phone with herself. The anxiety was growing. Her father sensed that something was wrong and decided to seek help from his neighbor, the chief of the New York City Police Department. They were on good terms, and the high-ranking official knew that Philip would not make a fuss over nothing. After that, Karina Vetrano was reported missing. Police began searching for the young woman, combing the park area and surrounding streets. As a result, experienced canine units were brought in, since it is known the first 24 hours after the sorcery. The disappearance of a person are crucial. Law enforcement utilized all available resources before nightfall. At the same time, Mr. Vetrano, along with a group of volunteers, searched for his daughter on his own. He scoured the park from end to end, combing paths and wading through tall grass, all while making phone calls. As dusk fell, he noticed a light in the grass. As he approached, he recognized Karina's phone. Maybe she lost it and just didn't let them know? Philip approached, headed toward police officers, deciding to continue picking his way through the thicket, stepping into the grass. As he ventured further, Philip stumbled upon something soft, a partially undressed female body lying face down. When he turned it over, a familiar face stared back at him. A desperate scream escaped from his father's chest. It was Karina. She hadn't simply lost her phone as he had initially believed. His little girl didn't answering her phone because life had been cruelly taken from her. The crushing realization of what had transpired overwhelmed Mr. Vetrano. The police, hearing the screaming and yelling, quickly rushed to him. They dragged Philip away from his daughter's body, explaining that it was now a crime scene. They emphasized that anything in the vicinity could be considered evidence and implored him not to touch anything to prevent tampering. On the journey home, Mr. Vetrano was lost in thought, tormented by how to break the news of their daughter's death to his wife. Images of past memories flooded his mind. He recalled vividly how on July 12, 1986, in Queens, their second daughter was born. From an early age, Philip had been proud of Karina. She was obedient and well-mannered. He remembered taking her to school for the first time and how excellently she performed academically. Her strong educational foundation enabled her to earn advanced degrees. Karina graduated from St. John's University with a master's in speech pathology. She always dreamed of aiding children and worked tirelessly with autistic kids. Karina loved traveling and writing and had a passion for sports, especially running, an interest she shared with Philip, which brought them closer together. He recalled how closely he scrutinized her suitors out of paternal jealousy, eager for her to find true love and eventually establish a strong family like his own with Kathy. He hoped for wonderful grandchildren. The return journey felt endless. As they approached the house, Mr. Vetrano paused at the entrance and took a deep breath. Fortunately, he didn't need to explain anything to her. She understood everything from her husband's face. Kathy cried, approached her husband, and hugged him. Soon, Karina's relatives and friends learned of the incident. They struggled to recover from the shock. Believing in the sudden death of the young woman was hard, let alone its violent nature. Miss Vetrano had been subjected to a brutal attack. This was the conclusion reached by investigators. At first glance, it was obvious that the woman had resisted. Even in death, her fists remained clenched. Bruises and abrasions were found on her once young and healthy body, and her athletic clothing was torn. The autopsy showed that the back of the victim's skull had been damaged by a blunt object, probably a stone. However, the cause of death was asphyxiation. A clear mark was visible on the woman's neck. The forensic examination also revealed the intimate nature of the crime violence. The experts' findings confirmed the police's initial suspicions. Earth and grass were found under the victim's fingernails, probably in an attempt to free herself from her attacker's grip and escape. Specialists examined her mouth and found teeth knocked out and cracked in places. She had clearly bitten to defend herself. Even the woman's neck was covered with numerous scratches. She was grabbing with her hands, trying to force her attacker to let go of her. Shortly after this tragedy, new information leaked to the media from Princeton, Massachusetts. Another jogger's body was found among tall grass. The woman had apparently also been out for a walk in a secluded place and suffered a similar fate. At first glance, these cases seemed identical, raising questions about another potential serial offender. In the United States, geneticists took charge of the case, tasked with comparing DNA samples collected from the crime scenes. Fortunately, unidentified samples were found on both victims. Contrary to police expectations, the analysis showed no connection between the crimes. It turned out that the DNA samples belonged to different individuals. It's well known that most lethal crimes are committed by someone close to the victim. Thus, police couldn't ignore any possibility. To this end, the victim's father provided his DNA, since he was first to discover his daughter's body. Later on, all of her relatives also underwent a DNA test which yielded no matches. Detectives then decided to interview Karina's family and friends to find out if she had any enemies or ill wishes. It turned out there were none. She was respected and loved by everyone. Investigators developed a new theory. Someone acted on base motives upon meeting Karina in a secluded place and attacked her. Feeling stuck, they sought public help by offering a $10,000 reward for information leading to the perpetrator. The initiative received widespread response. Detectives explored some 250 leads, conducted 600 genetic tests, and compiled more than 1,700 reports, all to no avail. It seemed like the perpetrator hadn't committed crimes before, or at least hadn't been caught for them, complicating things further. On August 31, 2016, a utility worker approached the police station with significant information at the time of Miss Vetrano's death. He found himself in a restricted area of the park one day. Suddenly, a man emerged from the bushes and took off running in a northerly direction. Because of his testimony, the New York Police Department created and distributed a sketch of the suspect in December 2016. However, they considered that the person shown in the sketch might have just been a passerby caught at the wrong place and time. Unfortunately, releasing this sketch didn't provide any new leads, and the investigation fell into another long stalemate. on December 4, 2016, the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined in to help solve Karina Vetrano's case. At first, they developed a psychological profile of the perpetrator. According to FBI experts, this individual was very familiar with the area, especially the park where everything occurred, suggesting he might live or continue to live nearby. Fearing capture now, he seems to avoid that area. It was evident he knew that the quiet and partially overgrown territory was perfect for hiding his actions. Based on this idea, police conducted screenings among local African American men. However, this didn't bring about any breakthroughs. Let's go to take a look about Chanel Lewis. Chanel Lewis's life didn't stand out much from other young African American individuals. He lived in one of Brooklyn's low-income housing complexes, approximately 4 or 5 miles from Spring Creek Park. Chanel was unemployed and living with his mother, 3 sisters, and their children. One detail setting him apart was his diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. Yet this did not stop him from graduating from a private school for students with emotional and behavioral issues. Former classmates remembered Chanel as a quiet loner who constantly faced bullying. One shared that even girls intimidated and punched him. He had no friends. Another peer noted that while Lewis sometimes fought back, he wasn't effective at it and often got ridiculed for his clothing and appearance. Chanel always wore a hoodie and would smirk and walk away when things got tough, earning him the unfortunate nickname African Lizard. 17-year-old Danielle Munes, a fellow student, described Chanel as a bright student with good grades. "He liked to show me funny videos on the bus," she recalled. "I never saw him being cruel." Some sources reported that the young man once claimed he wanted to harm all the girls during his time in middle school, even posing the question, "What happens if I bring a knife to school?" Dr. Edward Dana, the executive director of the school to which Chanel was transferred, commented on this. "We received no reports of threats in middle school. During his time at our school, he had no disciplinary sanctions. I never heard him make threatening statements towards other students." Nonetheless, Chanel was a troubled teenager who often experienced bullying. He dreamed of working in social services, aspiring to help those in distress. When conflicts arose at home, he would wander the streets frequently and visit the park. Lewis had several minor encounters with the police, 2 for violations in Spring Creek and 1 for urinating in public in May 2016. Another incident happened when a local merchant reported Lewis for loitering in his store with a crowbar. Responding officers checked Chanel's ID and released him as he had no prior incidents. However, this information was retained by the police and later played a crucial role in the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death. In February 2017, Detective John Russo, who was involved in the investigation, remembered something significant. He had repeatedly seen a young man in a hoodie wandering around the park. Russo even attempted to follow him once, intrigued by his behavior. The young man walked slowly and stopped for long periods in front of houses near the park, as if scouting them for potential burglaries. However, Russo lost sight of him when he contacted his colleagues by phone. Following a store owner's report of suspicious activity, a teenager matching Chanel's description came to the police's attention 2 months into the investigation. Detective Russo recalled this wanderer, thinking he might have seen or heard something relevant. Investigators then focused on Chanel Lewis after Detective Russo took a closer look at his file. Chanel's peculiarities had raised their interest. The police began inquiries about him, questioning acquaintances and teachers. It emerged that he had allegedly expressed a desire to harm girls. This news stirred significant concern and suspicion. With no other leads, officers decided to focus on Lewis. It was discovered that during Karina's death, Chanel was not at home. After an argument with his family, he had gone to the park. Upon his return, his appearance was disheveled, his clothes torn, and he had visible bruises and abrasions. When his mother inquired about what had happened, Lewis claimed he had been attacked. His account matched the timeline with a witness's description of a man fleeing the park. Additionally, on August 3, 2016, Lewis's father, a former school principal, took him to the hospital for treatment of severe wounds, mostly cuts, and he also had an injured hand. The investigators reviewed the medical records from that day and found the story plausible. However, they noted similarities between events involving Chanel Lewis and Karina Vetrano. On February 4, 2017, Chanel was brought to the police station and voluntarily provided his DNA for analysis. Detectives wondered if a perpetrator would willingly do this. The interrogation began on the morning of February 5th. Lewis admitted that he was indeed in the park around 5 p.m. on August 2, 2016, but clarified he was walking on dirt paths, listening to music, not through thickets. He confessed to encountering a young woman jogging with her phone in her hand. When asked by detectives if something happened when he encountered her, Chanel nodded and quietly said yes. "I was walking in the park, trying to distract myself from a family argument, when I met a woman alone," he began again. "I decided to follow her. When she passed by me, I grabbed her shoulders and threw her to the ground, then hit her face about 5 times so she couldn't scream." He recalled how his punches knocked out several of her teeth, injuring his own hand in the process, echoing details eerily consistent with earlier evidence they had gathered. He also mentioned that the struggle lasted about 5 minutes. Miss Vetrano fiercely resisted by biting. To avoid drawing attention, Lewis dragged her off the path into Tall, where he tried to undress and assault her. She was horrified, but kept resisting. Chanel then strangled her until he realized she was no longer alive. When asked if he knew the victim beforehand, he replied, "I did not know her before this. It all happened by chance." The motive for the act was unexpected and bizarre. Loud music played by a neighborhood gang member for hours had triggered Chanel's hatred and uncontrollable aggression. These negative emotions were unleashed on the unfortunate woman, a strange reason indeed. Investigators' confusion faded when DNA comparison results matched perfectly. Microscopic traces found on the victim's body and phone belonged to Chanel. Consequently, the police and prosecutor concluded the case was solved and ready for court. However, the motive still seemed unlikely. It's possible Chanel had noticed Karina before, since he often went to that park. He might have seen her with her father, liked her, and decided to approach her. After being rejected, he became furious and attacked her, causing the situation to spiral out of control. This scenario would have been more understandable. On November 5, 2018, the trial against Chanel Lewis began. Despite his previous statements to authorities, Lewis pleaded not guilty, a stance echoed by his family denying his involvement in the crime. The prosecution charged Lewis with ending a life and sexual assault, facing him with a sentence ranging from 25 years to life imprisonment. The debate over Lewis's guilt not only unfolded in the courtroom, but also spilled over into the media. Lewis's defense team stirred things up by pointing out alleged legal violations during his arrest, along with several news outlets. They claimed racial bias and discrimination. However, the judge dismissed these allegations as baseless, emphasizing that the investigation complied with legal standards. The prosecution presented tangible evidence and DNA analysis findings, while the defense argued that this evidence was insufficient and contaminated due to many people at the crime scene, including Karina's father, who discovered her body. Forensic biologist Linda Rosano stated that odds of the DNA belonging to someone other than Lewis were 1 in 6 trillion. The prosecutor also introduced Lewis's phone records, revealing his internet searches on second chances and forgiveness in Catholicism, which raised questions about what sin Chanel hoped to atone for. The release of Lewis's confession video sparked further controversy. His lawyers argued he was under immense pressure, leading to a coerced confession. They suspected police might have fabricated evidence. The recording commenced only after Lewis was pressured, raising concerns that the search of his home violated protocols. The defense suggested that the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death was initially mishandled. With public pressure mounting for an arrest, they argued, Lewis became a scapegoat. The jury was deeply influenced by the defense's compelling arguments. After considering both sides, jurors could not reach a conclusive verdict. On November 21, 2018, the judge declared a mistrial. A retrial was initially scheduled for January 22, 2019, but later postponed to March 2019. Following 5 hours of deliberation during the retrial, Chanel Lewis was ultimately found guilty of Karina Vetrano's death and sentenced to life without parole on July 23, 2019. The defense employed delay tactics by citing an anonymous source to allege misconduct by a juror, suggesting jury pressure and conspiracy. A case that seemed straightforward at first sparked widespread prejudices and fears in society. Karina Vetrano's tragic death affected many, serving as a stark reminder for women to remain vigilant about their safety. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Patrick de la Cerda. In February 2018, the quiet town of Deltona, situated in eastern Florida near the Atlantic coast, faced a shocking incident: the brutal murder of a young man named Patrick Dera. The 25-year-old man was found dead his home. His injuries suggested a deeply personal motive behind the attack. The Patrick Dera case is emblematic of a meticulously planned crime that nearly went unsolved. Although the suspect was identified almost immediately, no direct evidence was available to confirm his guilt. Patrick Dera was born in June 1992 in Miami, Florida, a picturesque metropolitan area. Patrick grew up under the care of his father Max Dera, originally from Spain, and his mother Patricia Ronza, born in France but relocated to the United States in the 80s. They married soon after and started their family. The Dera family was known for being close-knit and happy. Patrick grew up surrounded by love, care, and mutual respect. A kind, intelligent, and sociable young man, he did well academically and could easily become the center of any social gathering. From childhood, he had a strong bond with his parents, who spared no effort or expense to ensure he received a good education and developed into an upstanding individual. Max Dera worked in construction and was highly regarded in his field. Although not wealthy by big city standards, the family lived comfortably. After graduating high school, Patrick chose to study construction in university, aiming to follow in his father's footsteps. While Patrick attended university, his parents decided to divorce after nearly 25 years together. Remarkably, they separated amicably without any scandals or disputes over property. His mother moved to Deltona, a quiet town on Florida's east coast, where she soon remarried. Despite their separation, all family members remained close and maintained friendly relations. Patrick stayed with his father in Miami. They worked together and were respected professionals within the construction industry, despite their personal circumstances. They kept in regular contact, frequently calling and communicating. They were always ready to assist when necessary. Patrick often his mother in Deltona, sharing updates about his life, his joys, and experiences. He delighted in telling her about meeting the girl of his dreams. Thanks to his French-Spanish heritage, Patrick had an eye-catching appearance from a young age. He was quite popular with the opposite sex, but he valued the example set by his family. Consequently, Patrick did not pursue frivolous relationships. He yearned for a meaningful connection and a strong family of his own. Patrick created an account there based on a friend's recommendation and wasn't entirely convinced it would help him find his soulmate. One evening in June 2017, while browsing through profiles without much optimism, a photo caught his eye. A captivating brunette with mesmerizing eyes and an enchanting smile. Intrigued, Patrick decided to message her. The lady in the photo was Jessica Devani, born in 1988 in Orlando, Florida. After high school, she attended a local university where she studied banking before securing a job at a bank branch in her hometown. Jessica was immediately drawn to Patrick's profile as well. They exchanged messages on the website for several days before deciding to swap phone numbers. Over the next few weeks, they spoke every evening for hours, discussing various topics and forming a deep mutual sympathy and trust. Realizing their connection was genuine, they decided to meet in person, despite living in different parts of the state. They chose a location that was roughly halfway between them for their first date. On their first date, Patrick realized that Jessica was the girl he'd been searching for all along, and whom he no longer wanted to let go. She also liked him immediately, though Jessica was slightly confused by the age difference, as she was 4 years older than Patrick. On his way home, Patrick called his mother to share that he had met the girl of his dreams, whom he wished to marry and start a family with. Patricia heard the joy and excitement in her son's voice, recognized his seriousness, and felt happy for him. Their long-distance relationship lasted several months, presenting challenges because the couple could only see each other on weekends. They usually met somewhere neutral, renting a hotel room in a cozy, secluded place to enjoy each other's company. However, by Sunday night, they parted ways since they needed to return to work on Monday morning. In December 2017, Patrick moved to Delton, where his mother lived, to be closer to Jessica. He bought a house in a quiet neighborhood and began renovations to create a cozy nest for Jessica's eventual move. But Jessica couldn't leave her job immediately. Thus, they planned a housewarming party for early spring the next year. On New Year's Eve, which the couple celebrated together, Patrick prepared a surprise for Jessica. He arranged fireworks in the backyard of the house, and as she admired them, he got down on one knee and held out a box with a ring. He then asked her the most important question, whether she would become his lawful wife. Jessica felt incredibly happy, and of course agreed. Patrick later admitted he'd spent considerable time searching for an engagement ring, but hadn't found one perfect enough in any jewelry store. To make sure he could propose before the new year, he chose the best available option, but ordered an exclusive ring from a jewelry workshop. An original piece, designed by himself. 2 months had passed since the engagement. Preparations for both the wedding and the upcoming housewarming were in full swing. The couple's choice of events had received their parents' approval, and they themselves were unspeakably happy, readying for a new stage in their lives. The young couple planned an extravagant celebration, either on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean in Miami or in France, where the groom's mother originated from. On February 27, 2018, Max Dira, Patrick's father, received a call from a courier. Max's number was listed as an additional contact. The courier reported that Patrick's order had been delivered to the specified address. However, no one opened the door or answered the phone. This was highly unusual for Patrick, prompting concern from his father. As he was occupied at work and couldn't leave to pick up the order or check on his son, Max decided to contact Jessica, his future daughter-in-law. Max called Jessica with anxiety in his voice, expressing that he couldn't reach Patrick. Jessica herself had been trying to get in touch with her fiancé since morning, but had not received any replies or calls back. Upon hearing this, Max stated that something must have happened to Patrick. Alarmed by this suggestion, Jessica dropped everything she was doing and headed toward Patrick's house as quickly as she could. Upon arriving at Patrick's house, she immediately noticed his car parked in the driveway, indicating he hadn't left home. Armed with her own key, Jessica entered the yard and called out repeatedly for her fiancé, but got no response. She cautiously opened the front door, only to be confronted by a horrifying sight. Her fiancé lay motionless near the entrance, in a pool of blood. Jessica promptly called emergency services. However, paramedics who arrived on scene were unable to assist Patrick and could only declare him dead upon arrival. By the time police officers reached Patrick's residence, a heartbroken Jessica was found sobbing uncontrollably in the backyard, the very place where Patrick had proposed 2 months earlier. One of the attending officers approached her gently and began their inquiries into this tragic event. She only glanced at him and remarked that she knew who had decimated her lover and upended her entire existence, a wealthy and influential ex-boyfriend. To comprehend this perplexing case, and to decipher who might want to kill a young man, who at first glance seemed to have neither adversaries nor ill wishers, it is necessary to rewind a bit to when he and Jessica initially crossed paths. At that time, Jessica was entangled in a relationship with Gregory Bender, a prosperous businessman managing his own investment fund. Jessica encountered Gregory during her college years. He was 20 years her senior and quickly mesmerized the young woman. The businessman courted her lavishly, offering extravagant gifts and taking her to upscale resorts. Jessica believed she had discovered true love. However, soon she started noticing peculiarities in his demeanor. Gregory sought to dominate every aspect of her life, vigilantly tracking where she went and whom she associated with. Their relationship persisted for almost 8 years, during which time Gregory never introduced Jessica to his family or friends. Their interactions were strictly on his terms, meeting or going on vacations only at his convenience. Rarely did he invite her over to his residence. Jessica craved a conventional family life and children. Each time she raised the subject, Bender dismissed the idea as untimely. When she attempted to end the relationship, Gregory proposed with a ring. Jessica accepted the proposal, but nothing changed. They still lived separately, only met when he needed. One day, Gregory was involved in an automobile accident that left him hospitalized. Upon hearing this news, Jessica hurried to see him, but first decided to stop by his house for some essential items for Gregory. There, Jessica encountered an unfamiliar woman and inquired about her identity. Instead of responding directly, the woman asked a similar question back. Jessica displayed the engagement ring on her finger and announced that she was the fiancée of the house's owner. In response, the woman laughed and exhibited her own ring, proclaiming herself as Bender's legal wife, Diora Sanchez Bender. Shattered by this revelation, Jessica resolved immediately to end all ties with the businessman who had deceived her for so many years. The boyfriend began to actively pursue Jessica, begging her to return and promising that he would divorce Dormora in the near future so they could get married. Jessica believed him once more. However, time passed and nothing about their relationship changed. Eventually, tired of the lack of progress, Jessica filled out a questionnaire on a dating site where she soon met Patrick. After starting to communicate with Patrick, she firmly decided to break up with Gregory and informed him of her decision. Unfortunately, Gregory did not want to let her go. He became an obsessive stalker. Initially, Bender simply persuaded Jessica to come back and try again, promising once more to divorce his wife. When persuasion failed, he moved on to threats and harassment. Realizing these tactics were ineffective, Gregory decided to find out more about his rival, Patrick, about whom he knew nothing at the time. Gregory turned to professionals who hacked into Jessica's account to uncover who she was communicating with. After discovering Patrick's identity and obtaining his contact information, Gregory began sending threatening messages, demanding that Patrick break up with Jessica and referring to her as his fiancée. Patrick remained calm and unreactive to the threats, believing they would not escalate beyond verbal harassment. However, Jessica was frightened because she understood that her ex-boyfriend was capable of anything. He was a man with substantial financial resources and connections and owned a large collection of firearms. Jessica proposed breaking up with Patrick before anyone got hurt, but Patrick refused even to consider it. Consequently, they decided it was time to involve the police by providing evidence that Bender was stalking and threatening them. The couple succeeded in obtaining a restraining order against Gregory, while also requiring him to surrender all firearms stored in his home. Things calmed down for a while after this legal action. The lovers began thinking that the stalker had finally left them alone. Jessica persuaded Patrick that it was crucial to install CCTV cameras around and inside the house because she feared Gregory might violate the ban. On February 27, 2018, during the initial examination of the crime scene, criminalists immediately ruled out robbery. They noted that, by the nature of the mutilation, this murder had a personal motive, and that the perpetrator clearly hated his victim. The body of a 25-year-old man revealed 4 gunshot wounds, 1 in the thigh, 1 in the chest, and 2 in the head. Additionally, experts identified injuries and bruises consistent with a fall from a ladder. The body was found lying on the floor between the front door and the stairs, leading to the second floor. Investigators speculated that the killer had most likely snuck into the house and waited on the second floor. When an unsuspecting Patrick entered and climbed the stairs, he was met by his assailant. The intruder fired a bullet into Patrick's thigh, causing him to roll down the stairs. Following him down, the perpetrator fired another shot into his chest, before finishing him off with 2 shots to the head. Although no murder weapon was recovered, it was determined to be a rare model of pistol that is not easy to obtain. The first shell casing was found on the 2nd floor of the house. 2 more were found downstairs. However, a 4th shell casing was missing. Despite Jessica's statements about knowing who killed her fiancé, initial suspicion fell on Patrick's neighbor. They had a serious conflict some months prior. This neighbor was a U.S. Army veteran with combat experience who had developed a mental disorder due to severe injuries and concussions sustained during service. In December 2017, just months before, this veteran mistook his new neighbor for an intruder and opened fire, thankfully missing, but ended up hospitalized in a psychiatric facility due to an exacerbation of his condition. He was adept with firearms and could easily acquire rare gun models. This background made him a prime suspect in Patrick's murder, despite Jessica's accusations pointing elsewhere. Once he returned home, Patrick found himself constantly followed. A neighbor, who struggled with mental illness, was particularly suspicious of Patrick, calling him a spy and vowing to expose him. This neighbor's unhealthy imagination could indeed be a potential motive. Consequently, the authorities detained and interrogated him. The neighbor openly expressed his strong dislike for Patrick, but maintained a solid alibi at the time of the murder. Several eyewitnesses confirmed this alibi. Because these recordings were gone, it was impossible to determine who entered or exited the residence on that day. Adding to the challenge, no physical evidence was found at the crime scene. No fingerprints, shoe prints, or DNA traces. It became clear that the murder was meticulously planned. Despite their suspicions surrounding Gregory, it appeared as though he might evade justice for now. The police decided on a covert approach and asked Jessica to engage her former lover in an earnest conversation. She agreed without hesitation. Jessica called Gregory and dramatically blamed him for all that had happened. She wept and repeatedly questioned why he did it. Yet Gregory seemed to anticipate the investigators' intentions from the outset. He pretended not to understand what she meant. When Jessica accused him directly of killing her fiancé, Gregory feigned shock and offered condolences. Attempting to provoke a confession or trick him into making a mistake proved fruitless. Lacking concrete reasons to detain or further question him, police could only summon Gregory for testimony when required by law. He complied with restraining orders and appeared to have moved on from his ex-girlfriend long ago. While detectives struggled to find leads, a breakthrough came when Daura Sanchez Bender contacted them with crucial information about Patrick Dara's case. She was promptly invited for an interview at the station, where she revealed significant details occurring shortly before the crime transpired. She discovered a peculiar notebook concerning her husband's death in his office. Upon examining it, Daura found a detailed layout of an unfamiliar house and next to it, a peculiar series of procedural steps. Initially, she did not pay much attention to it. However, when Daura news report detailing the brutal murder of a young man and the story displayed the plan of his house, she immediately recalled the drawings she had seen by her unfaithful husband, with whom she was nearing divorce. She decided to inform the investigators. This information provided the police with sufficient grounds to search the house of the alleged perpetrator. They found the mysterious notebook that the businessman's wife had mentioned in his office. Although the pages containing the house's plan and additional records were missing, they were soon located in a trash can within the office. Gregory had apparently attempted, but forgotten, to dispose of them properly. He had merely torn out the pages, crumpled them, and discarded them in the trash bin. Apparently, he was confident that no search would be conducted on his house, as there was no incriminating evidence against him. On these pieces of paper, aside from the house's layout, there was an elaborate outline of the crime itself. it became evident that the perpetrator had meticulously planned every aspect over a prolonged period. The document mentioned specific actions like disabling his phone, wearing gloves, and applying a special substance to shoe soles to avoid leaving footprints on floors. From these records, it was clear that Gregory had tracked his victim. He knew Patrick's return schedule and was aware of surveillance cameras present inside and around Patrick's home. Additionally, Gregory ensured that he disposed of all incriminating items, such as weapons used in the crime and soiled clothes, shoes, and gloves. His downfall stemmed from his own records not being destroyed in time and his wife's curiosity. Furthermore, police discovered a fourth missing shell casing on Gregory's table inside a cigar box, evidently intended as some macabre trophy by Gregory. Forensics confirmed this casing matched those from the crime scene. The defense attorneys tried shifting blame towards Jessica during trial preparations. However, there was enough concrete evidence pointing towards Gregory for him to be arrested and brought forth for trial proceedings. The primary challenge then lay within considering all evidence collected deemed circumstantial, since neither murder weapon nor direct proof linked him physically at victim's residence, along with no witnessing testimonies, raised complexities. Ultimately, proceedings began against Bender. However, challenges remained in proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt. This was due to the circumstantial nature of the evidence. Crucial links were unbridgeable, making it difficult to reach absolute conclusiveness essential. Until May 2021, more than 3 years after he sought the best lawyers who had ample time to prepare for the case thoroughly. Despite this, the businessman remained optimistic, appearing to believe he would escape accountability. Jessica was a pivotal witness. She detailed her long-standing relationship with Gregory, describing how she discovered he was married and tried to end their involvement. She also shared instances of harassment and threats against her and Patrick. Jessica provided crucial evidence, including saved screenshots of correspondence and phone records. In response, Bender's attorneys attempted to shift all blame onto Jessica. The defense argued that Jessica herself provoked Gregory with her actions, registering on a dating site and starting a new relationship before ending things with Gregory. They claimed this behavior wounded his pride and ego. Furthermore, Jessica was accused of mercantilism, highlighting her fondness for receiving expensive gifts from a wealthy suitor. During one session, Daura Sanchez, the defendant's now ex-wife, was called as a witness. The previously indifferent defendant became animated and unexpectedly professed his love for her. Moved by this confession, Sanchez seemingly reconsidered her stance on testifying against Gregory. She got confused during her testimony, citing forgetfulness. Eventually, she mentioned that she had lived with the man for many years and doubted he was capable of murder. Defense attorneys tried to challenge the legality of the search of defendant's home. Despite his ex-wife's unexpected statement and the lack of direct evidence, the jury still found Gregory Bender guilty of first-degree murder after hours of deliberation. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. When the judge read the sentence, Bender stared at Jessica intently, without blinking. His glare really made her feel sick, and she almost had a panic attack. Sitting next to her late fiancé's mother, Jessica began sobbing and choking. Despite many attempts by Bender and his well-paid lawyers to appeal and get the case reviewed, all appeals were rejected. The widespread attention this case received in society played no small part in this outcome, since a wealthy millionaire businessman had cold-bloodedly murdered a simple working man and tried to get away with it. The story of Patrick Dira was widely covered in the press. As Gregory Bender remains behind bars, Jessica Devani says she feels safe. She continues to live in Patrick's memory, wearing the ring he gave her as a gift and another piece of jewelry that he never got around to giving her. Jessica maintains a close relationship with her deceased fiancé's parents, who treat her like their own daughter. Law enforcement officers are tasked with protecting the legal rights and interests of the citizens of their country, ensuring public order safety, and identifying and stopping any violations. Theoretically, The charter and principles of law enforcement operations sound flawless, but in real life, there are cases that literally make your blood run cold when people, who are meant to serve and protect, violate the law themselves or cover up for those who do. Such wrongful actions often lead to real criminal schemes, resulting in severe consequences. The case of Valeria Vivanco, a police officer who died in the line of duty, gained widespread resonance not only in Chile, where the tragic events unfolded, but also in the media of other countries. Essentially, the young woman's life was ended by a colleague who was supposed to protect her and ensure her safety. The most horrifying aspect was that the higher authorities knew about this and attempted to distort the facts, accusing another person of the incident and hiding the real circumstances of the event. Although the actual culprit of the tragedy was identified and even sentenced to a real prison term, the motive behind his actions remains unclear, whether it was a tragic accident or if it was deliberate. Moreover, it's puzzling why he was covered and defended by high-ranking individuals for so long. Even after it seemed the guilty party had faced punishment, the Supreme Court, upon reviewing an appeal, shocked the victim's family with its unexpected decision. Who was Valeria Vivanco? Valeria Fernanda Vivanco was born on May 29, 1996, in the small commune of La Granja, located near the city of Santiago, the capital of Chile, and was the youngest of 3 children in the simple family of Miguel and Jacqueline Vivanco. She was raised alongside her older biological brother Michelangelo and sister Daniela. The family patriarch worked for a company involved in the transportation of passengers and goods, while her mother was a homemaker dedicated to raising her children and creating a cozy home environment. When Valeria started school, her parents decided to separate. This was a huge shock for the girl, and although the ex-spouses continued to communicate post-divorce, and the father remained actively involved in the lives of his children from his first marriage, including providing financial support, the youngest daughter harbored resentment towards him. They occasionally argued, sometimes not speaking for months, but they always reconciled. Miguel Vivanco remarried soon after, and Valeria gained 2 more half-siblings with whom she, as well as Daniela and Michelangelo, maintained warm family relations. Jacqueline never remarried, raised her children, and later took care of her grandchildren, gifted to her by her older offspring. From an early age, Valeria demonstrated a strong-willed character, determination, and incredible perseverance in all her endeavors. She excelled in school, engaged in sports, was courageous and just, and was always ready to help others, sometimes even at risk to herself. It was likely this desire to assist those around her, protect the vulnerable, and stand up for justice that led her to pursue a career in the police force. After successfully completing high school, Valeria enrolled in the police academy in Santiago. She graduated with honors, becoming an investigator, and having received her diploma in 2016 at the age of 20, joined the Chilean police force the following year. She began her service in the bureau investigating especially serious crimes located in the capital. From the first days of her service, young Valeria proved herself to be a dedicated law enforcement officer and a true fighter for justice. She loved her job, performed her duties diligently, and was ready to rush anywhere at any time if required by her service. She could leave in the middle of the night to respond to a crime scene, chased after criminals, risking herself, and sometimes had to act as a psychologist when interacting with people who had lost loved ones. Colleagues described Vivanco as kind, cheerful, and friendly, yet she was a true professional and a reliable partner. She served in the police force for almost 5.5 years, during which she received a vast number of accolades, awards, and actively advanced in her career, earning the respect of her colleagues and the admiration of the leadership. Additionally, she represented her department in Spain, spending about 2 weeks in Madrid on an official visit. She was immensely proud to be entrusted with such responsible missions. By 2020, she had been promoted to assistant inspector, the new young colleague. In January 2020, A new member was welcomed to the precinct where Valeria worked, 21-year-old Lionel Alejandro Contreras Canales. Fresh out of the police academy, Valeria effectively became his mentor at his first job. A few months later, they became partners and initially got along pretty well. Little is known about Lionel's early years. Some information suggests he came from a rather influential and affluent family, with a high-ranking official as his uncle. Growing up in comfort, never wanting for anything, Lionel was quite self-centered, believing everything should go his way. Valeria quickly caught the eye of her new colleague and partner as he made various attempts to show her attention, tried to court her, and even asked her out a few times, but was met with firm rejection each time. Valeria took her job very seriously, considered workplace romances inappropriate, and was quite strict with the young co-worker, seeing him as immature. The issue wasn't so much the age difference, Lionel was only 3 years younger, as it was his behavior, which Valeria found childish but helped him mature. In July 2020, Valeria and her young partner were involved in apprehending robbers who had stolen money from a store's cash register. The criminals, not having left the scene and armed, initiated a shootout, during which both were fatally engaged by Lionel. Although casualties could have been avoided, Lionel's actions were not deemed excessive for apprehending the individuals. However, this incident strained the relationship between the partners. The last birthday. On May 29, 2021, Valeria celebrated her 25th birthday. The celebration took place at her mother's house, attended by many guests including relatives, friends, and work colleagues. Lionel, however, was not among the invited. Valeria, aiming to avoid potential awkwardness, chose not to invite her young partner, who had recently attempted to court her again. Valeria tried to talk to him about this, but he only repeated his affections for her, which he did not want other colleagues to find out about. Despite the large turnout, gifts, heartfelt congratulations, and warm wishes, the birthday girl seemed upset, though she tried to smile. The reason was a recent argument with her father, leading to days without communication. Valeria hoped her father would attend her birthday, allowing them to reconcile, but the likely angered parent only sent a terse congratulatory message, not even calling. Jacqueline noticed her daughter's distress and knew the reason behind her hidden sadness. Angry at her ex-husband's actions, she believed Miguel would eventually call Valeria, talk things out, and reconcile as they always had before. Unfortunately, the father and daughter never got the chance to talk again, as 2 weeks later, Valeria tragically lost her life while on duty. The fatal shot. On June 13, 2021, Valeria was on night duty, participating in street patrols and vehicle checks. This was not a standard procedure, but a search for suspects related to the crime against a young woman that had occurred the previous day in a suburb of the capital. There was an alert for a white Kia Tirado, believed to be driven by a suspected criminal. The suspect likely had a weapon and might not have been alone in the car. Valeria was in a patrol car with her partner Lionel, driven by Deputy Commissioner Felipe Gillardo Araya. They spotted the suspect's vehicle and initiated a pursuit without waiting for backup. The officers managed to intercept and block the suspect's escape. Canales and Vivanco exited their vehicle, weapons drawn, and called for the offenders to surrender and exit their car with their hands up. At that moment, a single shot rang out, and as everyone tried to understand who fired and where, Valeria, clutching her side, fell to the asphalt next to the police car. Reinforcements arrived just then, so her colleagues heard the shot and saw that she was wounded, but couldn't fully grasp what had happened and who had fired. The criminals, seizing the moment of confusion, accelerated and fled the scene while the injured officer was being administered first aid. Despite the rapid arrival of medics and her colleagues' efforts to stem the bleeding, Valeria could not be saved. She was rushed to the nearest hospital, where top specialists fought for her life for several hours. However, due to severe blood loss and damage to vital organs, she passed away on the operating table without regaining consciousness. When her family was informed, her parents, brothers, and sisters immediately rushed to the hospital, but by then, the wounded officer had already died. Miguel was not just stricken with grief, but utterly devastated, as he had not had the chance to speak and reconcile with his beloved daughter, with whom he had had a petty argument last. He felt a profound sense of guilt toward her, so shaken by the event that he himself required medical attention to prevent a heart attack. The search and arrest of the suspects. According to the official version, Vivanco died in the line of duty during an operation to catch dangerous criminals. She was hailed as a hero who gave her life for the peace and safety of others. This incident was widely covered in local media, with reporters vividly describing the young officer's heroism and self-sacrifice. The investigation was handled by specialists from the Homicide and Major Crimes Division, where Valeria herself had worked. They concluded that she died from a shot to the abdomen, fired by someone facing her from the direction of the suspect's vehicle she was pursuing with her colleagues. Everything seemed logical, with witnesses corroborating the story, making it appear that the case was solved and all that remained was to find and punish the culprits who were still at large and possibly on the run. Soon after, the suspects were apprehended, generating widespread public attention. The criminals turned out to be 19-year-old Miguel Alejandro Cañupan and his 17-year-old accomplice, whose name was withheld due to his minor status, both previously convicted for minor offenses. The then president of Chile, Miguel Juan Sebastián Piñera Echenique, issued an official statement promising that the perpetrators would be brought to justice with all the rigor of the law. Something doesn't add up. After the autopsy and all necessary examinations were conducted, the body of the deceased Vivanco was handed over to her family and was buried with honors at one of the capital's cemeteries. Hundreds of people came to pay their last respects, expressing their sincere condolences to the girl's family. According to Jacqueline and Miguel, the entire ordeal seemed like a horrific dream, and they hardly remembered the events of the funeral day. Among the men carrying Valeria's coffin was her colleague Lionel, who appeared to mourn her more than anyone else. However, according to other colleagues, there had been some tension between the partners lately, to the extent that the girl didn't even invite the young man to her birthday celebration. Almost immediately after the funeral, court proceedings began regarding the suspects who were apprehended the day after the incident and were in custody. At that moment, everyone was confident that the culprits were caught, and proving their guilt seemed straightforward, especially since they began to give confessional testimonies. However, it soon became clear that the investigation had been flawed from the start, with critical details overlooked and key findings from forensic experts downplayed. The process was mishandled, and high-ranking officials tried to conceal the identity of the true culprit behind the girl's demise. Thus, about a month and a half after the officer's death, the case took an unexpected turn. By the end of July, 2 employees were suspended from their duties, allegedly involved in the incident leading to Valeria's death. On August 1st, the deceased girl's parents were called to the capital's prosecutor's office for a meeting on an important matter. The parents thought that new evidence had emerged in their daughter's case, and that the detainees, awaiting their final sentence, would finally receive deserved punishment. However, the grief-stricken Jacqueline and Miguel were shocked to learn that their daughter died from a bullet fired by her colleague. This was personally communicated to them by prosecutor Juan Carlos Carrasco, who also conveyed his condolences and apologies on behalf of the entire investigative department. Valeria's parents were bewildered. They couldn't believe their ears and couldn't understand how such a thing could happen. They relived their grief anew and wanted clarification on the situation and why this information only became known so much later. As it turned out, that single fatal shot came from the service weapon in the hands of one of the girl's colleagues. This was confirmed by a ballistics examination conducted that same day, but its results were somehow distorted, and the bullet extracted from the body was sent to the evidence locker with entirely different characteristics: shape, caliber, weight, etc. Furthermore, The bullet had exited through and through, and it was not extracted from the body. The entry and exit wounds in the forensic reports were accidentally or intentionally confused. That is, the bullet did not enter through the abdomen and exit through the back, but quite the opposite. The shot was fired at her back. Some pages from the autopsy report were missing, while others were clearly altered and replaced. Additionally, the detainees, over whom the trial was proceeding and who supposedly confessed to their guilt and were about to be imprisoned, started filing complaints. They claimed that their confessions were coerced through torture and threats, and the pistol they had on them that evening wasn't even loaded. Moreover, their involvement in the earlier crime, which prompted the interception plan that fateful night, was also unconfirmed. New suspects. In a twist, Vivanco went from being seen as a tragic hero who died in the line of duty to a victim of betrayal, killed by her own colleagues. Given the new circumstances, the primary suspects became Felipe Giliardo Araya, who was driving the police car, and Valeria's partner, Lionel Alejandro Contreras Canales, who was seated in the back. Both suspects were immediately suspended from duty. Thus, on August 5th, it became known that the bullet that killed Valeria was fired from a service weapon. Subsequently, a document emerged with the results of the examination, indicating that only Canales had gunshot residue on his hands, making him the prime suspect. Notably, this finding had not been mentioned anywhere before, as if it never existed. Several other reports concerning the ballistics examination and the pathologist's conclusions were improperly filed and ended up in an archive box, which was never adequately checked. Whether this was an accident, criminal negligence, or intentional concealment of crucial facts was yet to be determined. Now the police officers who participated in the operation to apprehend the criminals themselves became suspects in the murder of their colleague. They, along with the previously arrested perpetrators, took part in a reenactment of the events of that night. Philippe claimed that from the driver's seat, he could only see Valeria, who was seated next to him in the front passenger seat and was the first to exit the car. Lionel was sitting behind and also exited the vehicle, but his actions could not be seen by the driver. Valeria had only taken a few steps when a shot was fired. She fell, and the suspect's car they were chasing sped away. Lionel then rushed to the injured woman to provide first aid. Lionel claimed that he and his partner exited the patrol car almost simultaneously, but she immediately rushed forward when the shot was fired. He insisted that he did not shoot his colleague, and the driver should have seen and confirmed this. He also confirmed that he was the first to rush to Valeria's aid and tried to compress her wound. Despite differences in the direct participants' testimonies, the reconstruction showed that Canales was behind his partner at the moment of the shot, and the bullet's trajectory matched his location. He was also the only person found with gunshot residue on his hands. Possible motives for the crime. After previously hidden reports and examination results were released, Lionel was taken into custody as the primary suspect, while the young men previously detained were released under a non-exit agreement, as there was effectively nothing to charge them with. However, the motive behind the young officer's actions remained unclear. The first and main theory was that the entire incident was a tragic accident. Supposedly, the young and inexperienced officer discharged his weapon unintentionally while standing behind his partner. He panicked, tried to help her, and when turning in his service weapon that day, insisted he hadn't fired it. However, the truth quickly surfaced, and influential relatives of the young man, using all their power, money, and connections, attempted to suppress the incident. Hence, the cleaned reports, missing documents, confusion in the evidence, and coerced testimonies from the detained. Another theory, partially confirmed by Lionel himself, was that he was unrequitedly in love with Valeria and desperately sought her attention. But all his efforts were in vain. Over time, he began to merely irritate the girl, who didn't even invite him to her birthday party attended by the entire department. The shot in the back was his revenge for the rejection. A third theory, proposed by the deceased's relatives, suggested that Valeria discovered something she wasn't supposed to know, some corruption scheme, official crimes, or something similar. As an honest and fair person, she would undoubtedly have exposed the culprits, which is why she was eliminated, and young Lionel was chosen as the executor, promised that he would remain above suspicion. The second suspect. Despite Canales being taken into custody, suspicions about Philippe were not entirely dispelled. He was armed with identical service weapons, also stood behind the deceased colleague, and could have fired the shot. Moreover, he had previously been disciplined for the unjustified use of a weapon during a criminal arrest, though no one was harmed in that instance. Araya had since been nicknamed the Reckless Shooter. The defense team hired by the relatives to defend Lionel immediately seized this theory, insisting that Philippe accidentally shot the colleague, and since the service weapons were identical, the pistols could have been mixed up or intentionally swapped. Additionally, the man was inconsistent in his testimony, changing it several times, and later he claimed he could not accurately describe the events of that night, as everything happened very quickly. However, no gunpowder residue was found on the driver's hands, indicating his innocence. In response, Canales claimed that gunpowder got on his hands when he was compressing the wound on the victim's body, and Araya, who also helped the woman, might have washed his hands before the examination. Yet this statement was not credible, as Valeria's bloodstains remained on Philippe's hands, and it's impossible to wash off gunpowder without removing blood. The trial and verdict. The quality of the investigative team's work was once again questioned, and the deceased girl's parents despaired, unsure how to achieve justice. Furthermore, the new turn in the case caused public outrage and led to mistrust in the law enforcement agencies. This story was now covered not only by Chilean but also international media. As a result, many high-ranking officials were suspended from work and soon lost their positions, particularly the head of the Homicide Investigation Department. After additional investigation, Lionel remained the only suspect, with all others excluded from the list and classified as witnesses. In the spring of 2022, he was officially dismissed and remained in custody until the trial's conclusion. The hearings for this case only began in March of the following year, and based on the evidence and witness testimony, the suspect's guilt was fully proven. Initially, the prosecution accused Canales of intentionally murdering his partner and sought the maximum sentence for such cases. However, the accused insisted he would never harm Valeria, as he loved her. Nonetheless, it was from his pistol that the bullet was fired, ending the girl's life. Lionel was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 12 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 8 years. Following the announcement of the final verdict, the Vivanco family expressed their disagreement, considering the sentence too lenient, while the defendant and his legal team immediately filed a series of appeals. However, the real shock came to Valeria's relatives in February 2024, when the Supreme Court unexpectedly overturned the previously assigned punishment, sentencing the perpetrator to only 540 days of imprisonment, counted from the day of his arrest. Effectively, he walked free from the courtroom. The detective Valeria Vivanco's family, in light of this event, plans to sue the Chilean state, accusing the judges of corruption. In an official statement, the deceased girl's mother said, "The 12-year sentence already seemed too lenient to us, but this is just mockery. I feel as if my daughter has died all over again. I no longer believe in justice. Our family plans to sue the negligent Chilean state, as that's exactly what it deserves."